week for the Public Safety Subcommittee on Appropriations.
We continue this next week too.
I think diplomacy is working as I talk to the floor leader here.
Communication.
Communication, that's right.
Communication.
This morning we're going to have presentations from the Superior Courts. Judge Sean LaGrua is here. Charles Miller and Ben Luke are all here. So we'll start with them. Judge, it's a pleasure to see you. It was good to see you yesterday at the opening of the Nathan Deal Judicial Center. It was a wonderful ceremony. Associate Justice Clarence Thomas delivered a very intellectual and riveting speech as to the value of separation of powers and the role of judiciary. It was very compelling. Have a seat. We welcome you to being here. Good to see you. Charles, good to see you as well. And we'll try to move through these fairly quickly this morning. We're going to focus on the full budget, so the FY 2021 budget, and we'll work through those as we can today. And so what I'll let you do is, Judge, if you'll just go ahead and start off with the budget. We're on Section 9 for Superior Courts. It's page 5 of your track sheet.
Got it.
And you can go ahead and take it from there. Thank you, Judge.
9.3.1 would be actually a reduction based on employer contribution rate of $218,000 plus some change. There's a request for an increase of funds to fund the
Judge,
rest.
could you pull the mic closer to you?
Sorry. Usually my voice is pretty loud. There's a request for an increase in funds to annualize the cost of the new judgeship in Griffin for the rest of the year, as well as Gwinnett. Both of those were in the 2020. There are 3 requests at 9.34, 3.5, and 3.6 to provide funds for the addition of 3 new judgeships, one in Ageechee, one in Flint, and one in Cobb. I believe that both the Flint and the Cobb bills have dropped. I had not heard whether the Ageechee bill had dropped or not. I know that the Cobb bill contemplates a start date of July 1 of 2021. If all 3 judgeships, we recognize what kind of a budgetary situation we're in. If those judgeships were not effective till January 1, 2021, that would be a savings of approximately $600,000. There is a request to increase funds for 10 law clerk positions. There are 34 judges, correct? Yeah. Currently that do not have law clerks or staff attorneys at their working with them. There is a request to increase funds for security protection software and information technology awareness training, and those are all in the Superior Court budget. In the Council of Superior Court budget, which is at page 5 of 23, 9.1.1, there's a request for 1 systems engineer position, a request for additional security software and software licensing, a request to provide funds for security audits, which I understand may be necessary for any kind of an insurance policy as it relates to hacking, and then provide funds for training, information technology, and security awareness training. And that is the entirety of the budget.
So, Judge, at the line 9.3.9, where it says what the governor's recommendation says is provide funds for information technology security awareness training. This would be the audits you're referring to? It's inclusive of that, or is this?
No, those are 2 separate requests. One comes out of the council office, where we have an IT person, but he is stretched thin.
9.1.3.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
He is stretched thin. We, again, are cognizant of the budget situation. He is here with us if you want to hear more detail from that. We were lucky, I guess lucky in some ways, not to be attached computer-wise with some of the hacks that have happened this year. And Ben Luke has done a phenomenal job of doing everything he can within the council office to make sure we're as secure as we can be.
Ben is here, right?
He
Ben-
is.
Ben, would you go to the podium over there, please, so that folks can hear you when we ask questions? So what we've seen is that obviously the Superior Courts are circuit-based. So it's good in terms of isolation. I mean, it makes it such that you might not be attacked. But I know that Flint Circuit was hit when our county system was hit. Their judicial system is dovetailed into the county's system as well. So Ben, when that happened, they're still recovering. All the courts for the Flint Circuit are recovering from that attack and the impact that it had on just the one county system. Without going into great detail, I think it's worth spending the time and resources to look at the impact that all these systems would have if, relative to each circuit. So if the circuits are tied to a particular county system, what does that mean, and to what extent are we looking as the Council for Superior Court Judges at security protocols to ensure that those systems are protected should a county be attacked, as opposed to just the Superior Court? And could you speak to that, Ben?
Yes, sir, I can, and it's a very good question. So we have limited control we can exercise over county-owned equipment. That's just the unfortunate reality. But the first step we're trying to take to address that is education. So we want to self-mandate or mandate within that all the judges participate in security awareness training. And that is a really good first step, because phishing and malware and cyber attacks usually require some type of interaction from the user. It's generally not some sophisticated exploit or a team of adversaries penetrating some technical weakness. It's usually an email, and it looks like your Amazon account, and you click on it, and now you have ransomware.
Yeah.
So we want to spend money and time and educate all our judges and their staff on how to identify those, on how to report them, on how to prevent them. And I think the second measure we want to take at the county level or at the circuit level in front of the judges and their staff is mandating and providing endpoint protection software. So right now, if a state-issued laptop goes out to a judge in the field, there's no minimum security baselines. The council doesn't really have the ability to offer them any kind of protection. We certainly advocate that they take certain steps to protect the device, but then it's almost like an unfunded mandate. We say, well, here's what you should be doing, but we can't really do anything to help you get there. So that's why we're asking for the funds to pay for endpoint security software to put on every state-issued laptop we put in a judge's hands or their staff's hands.
And Judge, you're providing support services for senior judges as well, is that correct?
We are.
So in my practice, senior judges, as well as many of our circuit judges, are riding the circuit effectively. They're on the road, so their laptop, that computer, is an essential tool for them to move from courthouse to courthouse, where they have to utilize that equipment, and that also means they're taking it home, and it also means that their additional software or information, downloads of documents are downloaded to those computers, and once they interact with the system, that's when you have a portal, if you will, for a virus ransomware to find its way into that circuit. And if it's a senior judge traveling from circuit to circuit, you could have effectively the virus being spread from circuit to circuit.
Absolutely.
So I hear what you're saying about the concerns there, and I think that is important, especially the auditing, the testing of this, because we do it in our own firm where we actually authorize our IT experts to send out phishing expeditions within the firm to see if our own employees will take the bait. And so that helps us to train employees as to what to look for and how to react to something that looks suspicious. So all of that, I think, is that's what the private sector is doing on a regular basis now to educate employees on not being suckered into one of those fishing expeditions. And it sounds like you're not doing that now, and this money would be helpful in trying to prevent.
We are doing it within the council office. We are not doing it throughout the state with our judges and staff.
And respectfully, Representative Welch, I might point out that while our council of judges is changing, we still have a large number of judges that did not grow up in the computer generation. So mandating some of that training is important. We have, and I think Ben can speak to, we have judges that are using old websites not connected to the county to do our business.
AOL still used?
Farther back. So, and it's coming along. We, at our recent conference, we had all 3 United States attorneys address the council about cybersecurity and some of the things that can be done, but it is a process, and we have to mandate some of the learning, changing passwords on a regular basis, the very obvious.
Thank you for saying that, and I know you meant that as well as we do. We're joking a little bit, but it's true. I mean, I have a difficult time wanting to change my passwords, and old habits are old habits, and they die hard. So I can appreciate some of their perspectives on trying to change passwords up to date, and then being savvy about what's being sent to them. And that's even more reason for you to be expanding the reach of what your program. It needs to be outside of just the council office. It needs to be looking at circuits and testing the circuits as well. And that probably goes for the clerk's offices in addition, where a lot of documents are initially deposited through Peach Court or through others to ensure that the documents that are coming in are not also laden with some malware that might affect the system. Vice Chair Rogers has some questions.
Yeah, I think maybe a question and then also a comment. I want to address the phishing aspect. It's become much more sophisticated, hasn't it?
It has. I have a master's degree in cybersecurity, and some of them come close to fooling me. I mean, for the layperson, they're extremely difficult to identify.
So it's probably a fair statement to say that if you have a judge who is probably about as computer literate as I am, which is not very. Yeah. Don't just sit there and be quiet for once. And he sees an email that comes in, and it's got the Council of Superior Courts on there, and da-da-da-da-da-da. You're automatically going to think, oh, this is fine or whatever. I mean, I've been not necessarily a victim of it or whatever, but I've gotten things in, the Amazon things, the this or that or whatever. And I mean, in Bank of America. Well, I happen to know I don't have a Bank of America. I don't even Bank of America exists anymore. But anyway, but I mean, all of these things are really going on. And, it used to be that you could go up to the email address and click on the email address itself and then find out, that it has nothing whatsoever to do with it. But now that triggers all kinds of other things too. Is that not pretty much? I mean, it just keeps ongoing and getting more sophisticated.
That's correct, and more targeted. One of the unfortunate side effects of being public sector is a lot of the information we have about our organization is public. So employee names and job titles and phone numbers can all be found online and then used to target you, the phishing victim. So they're increasingly more sophisticated, and I think one of the things we would aim to do with the security awareness training is teach the techniques like hovering over links and expanding the email address and kind of identifying the commonality amongst normal phishing attacks.
Well, as the technology continues to grow or whatever, the malware blocker or whatever that you're talking about, will your training continue to keep up with that? I mean, are the things that you're putting in place? I mean, in other words, I think what I'm saying is this is going to be an ongoing thing for us.
Absolutely will be ongoing.
So we may as well just figure this expense is going to be in there.
It would be an annual expense, absolutely. If it's one time, it's pointless. But people forget, and then the technology changes. The techniques phishing or attackers use change routinely. So I would envision it being at least a quarterly endeavor, if not more frequently.
I think that's smart. And then just one other thing, full disclosure, I do not represent Cobb County, but I saw that Cobb County is looking for a new judge here. It's my understanding from talking with a couple of different people that they've been in line for 2 new judges. And they just decided, to cut back to 1 and hopefully get 1 next year. But the recommendation has been for 2 judges, right? So in actuality, this is probably a smaller ask than what they could have asked.
I believe it was. They were in line, I believe it was last session, or was it the session before? The session before, and there were some issues with the clerk's office, and they had to redo it, and they're in line. There are actually 9 circuits eligible for additional judges, and I believe it was the decision of the Judicial Council to try and ask for those over a 3-year period rather than trying to ask for all 9 in one budget cycle.
I think that's smart. Thank you, ma'am.
Just so people that are new to this meeting, the antics between Vice Chair Rogers and the chairman from Liberty County, from Al Williams, is notorious. So I don't want anybody to take any offense to that.
That's because the chair from Liberty County is notorious.
There we go. so enjoy the show, folks. I'm just going to say. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge LaGrue, I want to drill down on the statement that you made that 34 judges don't have law clerks or staff attorneys.
Correct.
So they're basically on their own to write orders and opinions and legal research and everything?
Correct. Some circuits will share. There are times when as many as 3 or 4 judges are sharing one staff attorney or law clerk. And in the rural circuits where there are not supplements to the staff attorney salaries, they're getting students, recent graduates from law school trying to helping multiple judges deal with things. Fulton County's, I shouldn't give this away, but in full disclosure, we only have 1 state-funded staff attorney, but the county has seen fit to give us staff attorneys for all of our judges, but we only have 1 state-funded one.
And my follow-up was going to be recognizing that there are 34 that don't have it and you're requesting 10. Based on what you just stated, I'm guessing that there's going to be a sharing model going forward. Is
There
that right?
will be until we get to the point where every judge has one. Historically, our ask for law clerks and staff attorneys have gone at about 50% when we've requested them. So we didn't think it advisable in this budgetary cycle to push our luck.
Okay. And what is the average starting salary, if there is one, for a law clerk?
They all make the exact same salary.
I believe it's, if you could bear with me 1 sec, I think Charles has it. His recollection is it's around,
They all make the exact same salary.
I was pretty close, 42.9.
42.9.
That's less than an assistant solicitor makes coming out of law school,
And there was
handling misdemeanor crimes.
And the council had requested last year, I believe it was the year before last, that we move that baseline salary up to the same as an entry-level ADA, so that there would be parity in those entry positions. Due to other budgetary priorities, we declined to make that shift. And Judge LaGrue is correct. The request has been to put in these judges, and what we've done is we've tried to honor that request, but it's not been at the full amount that they've requested due to the fact that other priorities kind of intercede. But recognizing that what the judge is saying is that you have judges in rural circuits that are on the circuit, as I meant, they're driving around the circuit, and having that law clerk is very helpful to them in order to both collect files and to take notes as the hearings move forward, to help draft orders, be responsive while the judge is trying to go from hearing to hearing. So you have someone that's actually working through that process. So it is an extremely good benefit to have. But I think the judge is correct. At this salary level, they're coming in a law school. Now that's a perk as well for a law student to have that clerkship. But if I've been told correctly, and I think the judge would agree, that they're wanting to move from the concept of clerk, law clerk, to staff attorney, this being more of a permanent position and not a resume builder for a law student coming out of school, for the reasons that I just mentioned, that the demands on the judges are exceptional, and especially when you're having to ride a large circuit.
Right. I agree with that, and I think if the law clerk is skilled, then that can certainly improve the efficiency with which cases are being moved through the system. But at the same token, if we're getting fresh students, then the judge is going to have to invest time to train them, to get them up to speed to do their jobs in the first place. And I'd be curious to know, like, turnover and everything. Longer term question, but it'd be something that I'd be interested in knowing.
We'll take a
more
look at that so we can have an answer for you going forward. We'll try and do a survey of the experience level statewide of our staff attorneys and law clerks. I know in the metro area, I can tell you that it is a huge benefit to have ours are staff attorneys that generally have more experience either in the courtroom or having clerked previously. And it does help with the efficiency of the court.
Yeah, thanks.
Resume, let's see, Chairman Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the cybersecurity, just a few questions. How many people are we talking that are needing to take the training?
We have approximately 20 within our office and then about 400 statewide.
So about 420.
Yes, sir.
So is the 14,000 enough?
I think it is.
Okay.
Our training provider is competitively priced.
Okay, and how is it being offered? Is it coming online? Is it a in-house, somebody coming in doing a?
It's completely online and self-paced. They do make the training materials available to us for download, so we occasionally incorporate it into our conferences.
Okay. You mentioned endpoint software on the laptops. Is this just like an antivirus, or is it some kind of standard desktop configuration?
It really is just, it's an enhanced antivirus, you might call it. It allows you to apply policies. So if you were to plug in a USB drive, you can restrict the type of content that's allowed to be transferred from one location to another. It has defined ransomware protection, so the endpoint software will detect if your files are suddenly being encrypted and allow you to revert to before the attack. So it is antivirus software. It's just a lot more sophisticated, and it allows us to better protect than if we were to put something like Malwarebytes on there.
Okay, so you brought up encryption. Are the laptops themselves being encrypted?
So there is not a standard issue laptop that we give out. There is within our office, and the answer to that question within the council office is absolutely yes. Unfortunately, what happens in the field is a judge might say, hey, my laptop died, I need a new laptop, and their district court administrator is frequently the one they go to facilitate that. So typically the district court administrators aren't trained in IT or cybersecurity, so they're getting an off-the-shelf laptop most of the time. I will say the endpoint protection software does allow us to enable and enforce encryption. So in their current state, it's a mixed bag, but if we could standardize the image that we're deploying, then we could mandate that the laptops be encrypted.
Okay, and then you mentioned doing like I mean, it is going to have to be ongoing. I know, working in the DOD a little bit, that we have to do annual, or else we actually get locked out when we go to log on and it says you
Right.
gotta go do this train. Are you gonna implement something like that too, where you're gonna lock out a person if they've fallen out of compliance?
I would have to get buy-in, but that's what we do in the council office, and that is ultimately what I would like to do throughout our organization.
Oh, I think it's wise because, I mean, if you don't do that, there's no way of enforcing that they're taking the training. So if you're
Agreed.
gonna mandate it, you gotta have some kind of compliance,
Right. The carrot and
regulation
the
that, yeah,
stick.
right. You gotta
Agreed.
they gotta stay in compliance or else there's consequences.
That is certainly my goal.
Okay. The 14,000, if you think that that's sufficient, good, but, my fear is if it's not, then an attack will potentially cost the state a lot more money than $14,000. So,
Right.
That's just my only concern, but,
I certainly appreciate that. We priced a few different training providers, and they were similar, but the one we're using currently in-house gave us that
Okay.
quote. So
All right.
we're pretty comfortable with the number.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Clark. Judge, before I give the last say to Representative Williams, I do want to just telegraph a message that you had pointed out. The Flint Circuit has amended its legislation so that it would be a January 1st start date, and I would recommend that the Ogeechee and Cobb do the same.
I will make sure that gets passed along.
Okay.
Representative Welch, might I tell you one quick thing before? We are doing other things, cost savings. It's not represented in our budget always because it's other places, but Judge Paget is here, who's heading up, he and Judge Kell, making hearings from circuits to the prison system via video conferencing,
Good.
which over time is going to save a lot of transport money and safety issues. So we are looking at ways, even if it's not our budget specifically, for cost savings for the state, and I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, that's a good point because we've the governor's office has asked us to look at cost. All agencies across the board to look at cost savings and using technology wherever we can achieve that. And one of those is the remote hearings so that you can video conference hearings, which will be very beneficial to both DOC and the judges in terms of safety, transport, cost reduction. So that's a positive move in the right direction. I know that's going to be cost because you've got to make sure that every courtroom has the capabilities to accommodate those video conferences, and that may be something we have to look at in the future. I did also want to say I wanted to thank you and thank the council because what members don't see is some of the reasons why the judge is bringing up these start dates and the law clerks is that every single member of the judiciary has recognized that this budget is a strain on, in particular, the criminal justice system, from the prosecuting attorneys to the superior courts, to the Supremes, the appellates, even the business court with Mr. Davis being here today. Everyone has recognized that cuts in the public defender's department does not further the criminal justice system.
Does not.
And so committee members, you may not know that, but in discussions that I've had with these agency heads, everyone has expressed the same sentiment that you all have expressed here in previous hearings, that in order for our criminal justice system to work, it must be balanced and it must be fairly apportioned and appropriated. And so I just want you to know how the entire criminal justice system as a team has kind of pulled together, looking out for each other. And that says a lot about the integrity of those agencies, and I appreciate that. One last question before I turn it over to Al to close us out. Can you speak, Judge, to the impact of the accountability court system and the prospective cuts that are in the governor's budget on our accountability court system, and to the judge's ability to administer those systems without the grants that have been, that at least have been cut or proposed for cuts by the governor's budget?
The last statistics I saw were that we would not serve at least 500 individuals that would either have to go straight back to the street or to the prison system without the accountability courts. And there are, I believe it was 10 new ones coming on. 11 new accountability courts that would have come online in July that will not be funded at this point. I realize it's a tough budgetary time. The accountability courts work. They have a huge impact on the state, the quality of our communities, the quality of the families in our communities. They keep families together. They keep food on the table. They make it so we don't have to pay for the food that's on the table. These are people out working and earning a living and supervised. Judges got a good benefit when the legislature was kind enough to give those circuits with accountability courts a little raise for the time they put into it. But the accountability court judges spend a lot of time and a lot of heart and effort. And if there's something besides public defenders that I would like to not see go, that would probably be number two. The public defenders do a phenomenal job. I've been in the system my entire career, and they do just a magnificent job.
Thank you, Judge. Al, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope we've got enough time. But I do want to say this. Thank you all for what you do. I've been listening very closely. I apologize for being a little late, but when there are cuts, as the chairman has said, what happens is because of the density in the urban areas, you have a lot more judges. When you come to rural Georgia, where judges drive unbelievable amounts to do the circuit, and you cut public defenders, where disproportionately this affects poor people and people of color, and because of how society operates, when you get out in the rural area where relationships can get a lot closer, you end up disproportionately with poor people going to jail. And when you don't fully fund clerks. See, I've listened over the last couple of sessions with the rural initiatives. But the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the judicial the judicial system. Broadband is vitally important, healthcare vitally important in the rural. But what about justice? And we miss that piece because it gets under the radar. And while I have some very dear friends in the Atlantic Judicial Circuit, so this is not directed at them per se, but judges a lot of times take on a Jesus complex. You know, I'm Jesus, you're disciples, and you're not even high-ranking disciples. So I don't necessarily have to have a computer because there ain't nothing like my little notebook. It's worked for me, and it will continue to work. Antiquated, dinosaurs. But the world only got help after dinosaurs just kind of disappeared. They have to live on out because you got a great system here. You get too old to serve, then you get senior status, and you keep serving. But you've got to, when the state or urban Georgia has a cold, rural Georgia has pneumonia. And you're killing us. When we cut money for services that are vital, accountability courts, Jay Stewart, judge down the Atlanta Judicial Circuit, has done one heck of a job. And so now we decide to cut something off from him. We have a disproportionate amount of people in my district who are military connected. Liberty County, 70%, highest density in the United States. PTSD and all of these other illnesses peculiar to veterans who come out of wars. Accountability courts have been critical. We can't survive without them. So on a day when you have more time and I'm able to continue this diatribe, we'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm an Army brat, so I feel your concern about our veterans. I feel the same way.
Judge, also educate the committee on, this is to Representative Williams' point about the rural areas. My recollection is that the, the council has been placing the law clerks in circuits that have the greatest need and that are typically rural with the largest areas to cover. Is that correct?
That is correct. As I mentioned earlier, Fulton could be begging for more state-paid staff attorneys. We don't. We recognize the need outside, and when we vote on where we assign the law clerks that are funded, we look at the highest need and the lowest, the circuit that has the least law clerks or staff attorneys and the most need, as best we can as they're funded.
Mm-hmm. And that's speaking from a Fulton County judge right there. So she's making a sacrifice to help out rural Georgia. So I think Representative Williams' point is well taken, and I hope the council will continue in that endeavor.
We will, and we will continue to work with all our colleagues across the state to help them have the resources they need.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no other questions. We appreciate your presentation. Thank you. Ben, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
With that, we have our next item is Business Court. Mr. Walt Davis is here to present on behalf of the Business Court, and he has his budget. You'll find this attached to the Court of Appeals. So it'll be on your first page, section 5.2, and it's page 1 of your track sheet. Mr. Davis, thank you for being here today. Good to see you at the opening of the Nathan Deal Center yesterday.
Likewise.
And if you could, just go ahead and walk us through the very, very short budget request here, most of which we've tackled in the amended.
Sure. The first thing I'd note is originally the request was for a little bit north of $1.6 million. That's comprised of 1.3 in personal services and 300, give or take, in operating expenses. After consultation with the chairman in restructuring staffing, that came down by eliminating a position to about 1.552,810. The remainder, the other thing I would note is that that 1.5 number is comprised of two parts. The first part is related to the business court specifically, and the second part is water that effectively I'm carrying for the clerk of court, who him or herself is a separate constitutional officer under the statute, but has not yet been named by the governor. And so I've worked with different clerks of court candidates that we've spoken with to build out the staffing plan. So the way that breaks out is, in effect, the business court is carrying 981,000 of that, and the clerk of court is carrying 571,000. My, if you will, the business court number comprises salary, fringe, and all of the operating expenses. So rather than slice and dice and try to assign different costs to the clerk of court, I just put it all in the business court. So all of that 307,000 goes into the business court, even though it's going to be a shared expense. The clerk of court only includes the 571 as salary and fringe specific to the business court. I just thought that would be an easier way to present it. Within that, as I said, the personal services come out to about 1.2 million, and the remainder is 307,000. And with that, it's a fairly straightforward budget.
On our track sheet, excuse me, on our track sheet is showing 1.31836. So is there a different? Do we have a different number?
We may have blended the 428,000 that I gave back from the amended with some of this.
Okay.
And I haven't, if you'll allow me to bookmark that, I'm going to come back to the amended as well.
Okay. We'll just double check that.
Okay.
Confirm that with you.
And I can email Mr. Groom the copy that I have.
Yes, sir. Any questions for our prospective judge for the business court? Representative Holcomb, you don't have any questions? No. It's a great time to ask some questions. All right, Mr. Davis, thank you very much. You want to add some more?
Yes, sir. When I was when I was
careful.
when I was
Sometimes
counsel, you know, you said you'd get no questions, just walk away. But
yeah.
after sitting through the Senate presentation yesterday and hearing some of the presentations, I went back in the amended, and I'll email Mr. Groom, but there's another $31,000 that I'm going to reduce from the supplemental budget. That effectively comes from two parts.
Okay.
The commission that was established by this body to help with the rule drafting, I reached out to them, and the fringe reimbursement, travel reimbursement, that sort of thing that they were entitled to under the statute, they've all agreed to waive, and so that comprises approximately, I've got the number here somewhere, but anyway, and then I built in a judicial assistant for that was cut previously for the last 3 months leading up to the opening of the court, and I'm going to cut 2 months off of that. So I'm in fact just asking this body for 1 month with a judicial assistant. So I'll go solo for another 2 months. So will just be $7,000, and I'll email that to Mr. Groom. But in effect, my supplemental will come down to 450, or come down by 451,000.
Okay.
Somebody grab that money.
That's
I hope they do.
Well, and then this has been the theme from every court, from every from every branch of the judiciary, working to try to help us reapportion money and reprioritize money. So we appreciate that very much. Mr. Davis, I got to see your office. I hear you're being relocated again, so I saw your office yesterday, and I can tell you this: you're in good company with your new location. So.
I'm honored to be there. I'm somewhat itinerant at the moment, so I'm looking forward to settling down.
Thank you. No further questions, and we'll look forward to getting that information from you, and appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
All right, next up on our agenda is juvenile courts. If I could, there's some members I didn't, come on up, Eric. Eric John is the executive director. Kirsten Wallace is the budget director. Has a great Scandinavian name, Kirsten. It's my sister's name as well. A little Danish history there. And then Anne, thank you for being here as well. So just for 1 second, Scott, there are some members here. Would you mind introducing Bob? Bob Trammell is here, minority leader, has joined us today. Would you mind just introduce some of the members that are here, that are in the audience, that are not members of the committee, but they have come to be present during the meetings, and I just wanted to take a moment to recognize them. If you don't mind, Bob, could you come up to the podium and just recognize the members there that have come?
If you're a member, if you'll stand so I can make sure. We've got Representative Nelson here, Representative Davis. Am I missing anyone? Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the opportunity to be with the committee this morning and listen to the testimony.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and I'm glad you're back. I know you had some delayed arrival back, and we're good. It's good to see you. And we've had other members that have been here, and I apologize for not recognizing them before, but we've had numerous members that are members of the Appropriations Committee that have been attending our meetings, and it's been nice to see them here. And other members that are not a part of appropriations but have been attended to the process, the budget process, and that's been good too. It just goes to show how important this budgetary cycle has been, that members are coming during their week off to be here. So thank you. With that, Kirsten, I'll go ahead and let you take us down to the
Great. Thank you,
your
Mr.
budget.
Chairman, and thank you for that great introduction. No pressure on my name. Mr. Chairman, we have two budget requests for fiscal year 2021. The first budget request is for the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative statewide coordinating position. This is a position that the council's had for 3 years. Currently, it's being funded by Department of Juvenile Justice through an MOU with our council. The reason for that request is just to have the funding within our budget rather than having an MOU with Department of Juvenile Justice. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to keep going, or? Okay. The second request we are requesting to provide funds for the accountability court salary supplements for the juvenile court judges to reflect an appropriate compensation rates. And this is comparable, which I think we talked about in the last meeting, comparable to what the Superior Court judges are receiving for the accountability court, their supplements. This was actually a discussion before reductions were instituted across state agencies from the governor. So there is not currently a bill supporting this funding. And those are our two requests.
Okay. Do you have a prospective member that is going to be looking at that bill?
We had talked to Madam Chair Ballinger. I know there's still discussions, but we haven't gone any further. That would probably be something that our director, Eric John, could probably speak more to
Okay. Well,
about that discussion.
all right. So when we don't have a bill that corresponds with the funding, we typically remove that money. So Walt just left, but he's had struggles, with the business court. When that legislation was passed, it actually was signed into law after the Budget Act was finalized and signed into law. So he didn't have a line item for the budget, the business court until this particular budget cycle. So that's why we do that. It's to correspond with the legislation that exists. Once a line item is created from a legislative standpoint, then we can appropriate, not the other way around. And I know you know that, Kirsten. That's more for educational purposes. And that's why she's bringing it up. She's just trying to be in full disclosure, tell us where we are in this process. So with that in mind, though, I think it's important that the committee bear in mind the burden that juvenile court judges take on. Since we shifted in terms of our juvenile court structure, we pushed a lot of unfunded mandates down to our juvenile court judges, especially dealing with children in need of services. Their roles became less dealing with just delinquency and dealing with much more of socioeconomic issues that they have to hear and address and are charged with on a much shorter time frame than had been previously allotted in the law. And in doing so, they've also taken on more roles as being stand-in accountability court judges for superior court judges, as well as with respect to the family treatment courts. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. As this legislation moves forward, the committee may want to consider that in the years to come. So this request, I assume and presume, it will come back, and I would encourage that it does to address some of these needs. We took care of some of this in respect to increasing the stipend, that the grant money that goes down to the juvenile court judges, but it was a modest adjustment. It was not I don't think it was a full addressing of the need. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. Anything else you want to present, Kirsten? There are no questions for you.
Okay.
Eric wants to say something, so here we go. Ready?
I think you touched on this, but I wanted to make clear, all of you I know appreciates your juvenile court judges. They tell me, a lot of them have reached out to me, have asked, how do we help juvenile court judges? That's the most difficult job in the community when you think about it. They're dealing with the most volatile families. They're either taking children away because they've committed a wrongdoing and taking them away for that, and the parents never understand. They don't understand why my child didn't do anything wrong. It's just a minor theft or trespassing. And then they also take children away when the parents abuse them and neglect them, and that's very volatile. And that's one of the hardest cases they deal right now. And they're with the new code, they're up to here with hearings and process that they've been doing. But let me go real quick, and just so you be proud of your juvenile court judges and be proud of this office, which I am. Ever since criminal justice reform was initiated, we've dealt, just juvenile court judges, the new code, implementing the new code, juvenile court incentive grants, JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, which we're trying to save money by not detaining children, detention assessments, which is important, we're trying to save, JDEX, which is something that's been happening since 95. It's been tried since 95 when I became director, and this is the farthest we have ever gotten. That's to establish a database so that judges are aware of what the children are doing. We've been working on that. CHINS, Children in Need of Supervision, we've got a staff member who's doing that. We have numerous other data collecting projects. You're going to get a bill from the Senate that's going to ask clerks to collect data on timelines and deprivation cases so that we can find out where the timelines are being broken That's going to be difficult. There's all kinds of reasons, you all know as attorneys, there's all kinds of reasons why timelines aren't met. And finally, the accountability courts, family treatment courts, which we're just starting to move into, and we were going to have 4 new ones come on board, and it looks because of the budget cuts, we're not going to be able to do that. So most of these projects are being led by judges, juvenile court judges, not by the community, not by other agencies, by juvenile court judges. You know, that's not their role, but that's our leadership role that we have embraced. And I want you to know that, and I want you to be proud of your juvenile court judges, and I know you are, and they very appreciate it when y'all compliment them or you reach out to them. And I just wanted to go on record with that, Mr. Chairman.
Eric, thank you for your impassioned plea on behalf of the judges, and that is appreciated, and it is not lost on this committee at all. We have a question. Is that Belton or Clark? No. Mr. Gravely.
I want to thank the juvenile court system. I also want to just recognize, since we are on this section, our Douglas County Juvenile Court Judge Peggy Harris Walker, who just recently retired, and Mr. Chairman received our Douglas County Lifetime Achievement Award Saturday night at the Chamber Gala for all the work that she's done. But we're very, very proud of her, and we appreciate her lifetime of service. So just wanted to recognize her.
Thank you, Mr. Gravely. All right. Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you very much for the presentation. Eric, thank you for that
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
plea, and we appreciate you presenting. Prosecuting Attorney Counsel is next. We have Pete Scanalakis, the Executive Director. Mark Williams, the CFO, and Bert Poston. Is Bert here? I didn't see him this morning.
Yes, sir. He's in the midst of a murder trial.
But as he should be. I'm glad he's there doing that. You have Ms. Kemp behind you. I think she's kin to the governor, so be on your P's and Q's, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. If you would just introduce her behind you. So
I would. This is Mark Williams. Mark is our CFO, and Mark is just a valuable asset to the agency. And behind me is Kathy Kemp. And Kathy does our grants management programs and our billing. So Kathy's here to help answer any questions that I may not be able to answer to you. So if we look at the 2021 budget, and I thank you very much for allowing us to be
Section
here
8. We're on Section 8, page 4.
If you look at the District Attorney's Program, 8.2.1, increased personnel funding for assistant district attorneys to provide the ongoing recruitment and retention of career prosecutors. Last year, the House and the Senate were both very instrumental, very helpful in us trying to stop the bleeding that we were suffering at our mid-level assistant DAs. We have a turnover rate about the last 3 or 4 years have been about 18, 19, 20%. And we're losing career prosecutors, and we want to try to get them back on a scale where we can keep them. Obviously, a career prosecutor has the experience necessary to evaluate a case, make a good decision on the case, and work with the public defenders to make sure that justice is performed on particular cases. So that's why it's important for us to try to keep these career prosecutors. If you look at 8.2.2, you see we've asked for 12 juvenile assistant district attorneys, juvenile prosecuting assistant district attorneys. That's a program that started in 2015 to give one assistant district attorney for juvenile court in every circuit. We are now down to filling those 12 last positions. And I understand because of the budget that we're looking at, I think it's important that we also have parity with the public defenders. So those 12 positions, we understand the House may look at and decide that all 12 positions are not fundable at this time, but we understand that. And also 8.2.3, annualized funds for new judgeships in Griffin and Gwinnett. And that concludes our budget, and I'm prepared to answer questions. On the PAC side, we've asked for no additional increases. We've just asked for the budget to continue at what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Mark, did you want to add anything to that?
Nothing in addition, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Just for some new members, 2 points that Mr. Scanlactus made that you should be aware of is, number one, is that as we have done added juvenile court ADAs, or assistant attorney generals, we have also, almost every single year, we have borrowed, if you will, from PAC's request and moved a commensurate or equal number over to the PDs. So we've made that program shift or budget unit shift from DAs so that we kept a balance. And the committee, since I've been chairing, has been working on parity between those two organizations, both in salary and in and in numbers of members. As I mentioned before, the Juvenile Justice Act, it created a lot of unfunded mandates for locals. And one of the ways we've overcome those unfunded mandates is actually to fund them with positions. And so we worked, understanding that, and we worked diligently to solve that. This is the last set, interestingly enough, we're almost there, where we've been able to put at least one new lawyer for the juvenile courts in every circuit for ADAs and PDs. And so we are almost there, but with the budget adjustments we're making here, I suspect the committee may be wanting to do the same that we've done in the past, shifting those positions over, some of those positions over to the PDs. The good news in some of this is that the PDs have fewer circuits to cover than the ADAs, so that affords us some relief in terms of this process. I appreciate, Director, your willingness to accommodate those requests and to work with us on them. In addition, you're asking for an increase because over the last 5 years, I believe, it's been that with your predecessor, Chuck Spahas, has laid out a plan. It was a 3-year plan to try to increase the pay scale, trying to adjust for lawyers that are looking to private sector versus public sector. The public sector environment has been lagging behind in terms of the marketplace for paying good quality attorneys to work in that sector, and we've been working slowly, diligently, and suffering some setbacks with our senators on the other side. Hopefully we won't suffer that again this year on trying to make sure we get those payments, get those salaries and the scale moving upward. And that way that if you go into the prosecuting attorneys, if you choose as a profession, you can actually look at it as a profession and know what your pay scale is and look to have know what your 5-year outlook is going to be, your 10-year outlook is going to be, and try to move people into the position of becoming career DAs throughout our state, which there's been a distinct gap in the last 10 to 15 years in terms of that, setting up predecessors to move into those positions. I think they had to run you off, didn't they, Pete, from Coweta?
No, they did not. I had done my time there, so it was time to go on to different things.
See, Pete was just trying to help that system move it along and get the next guy.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that was just a little bit of background to know for new members of the committee that this has been an ongoing project that we've worked on diligently, and we appreciate the cooperation of PAC with us on that endeavor. One last question that I have for you, Director, is could you explain to the committee and to the public that may be watching this the importance of the balance between having someone from the public defender's office working as a criminal defense lawyer for the accused and how that affects the prosecution and the administration of justice?
Absolutely. As you all well know, the criminal justice system is labor intensive. You have to have people. You have to have people that can talk to police officers, talk to victims, make sure that the case is properly screened, and then make sure the proper charges are filed. On the other side, you have to have people that talk to the defendants. You have to have people that are skilled in being able to manage a caseload. And then also people for the public defenders that can evaluate a case and can talk to their client about the options. Because one of the things you have on every criminal case, maybe some of the more violent ones you may not have, but almost every criminal case, there are options on how that case can be disposed of. And the prosecutors are concentrating on representing the public, as they should be, and the public defenders are concentrating on representing their client, as they should be. And because it's labor intensive, none of that gets done unless there's parity. A prosecutor can't go talk to a defendant. We just can't do that. We counsel against it simply because we have a different interest. Our interest is different than the defendant's every time. Now, we may come to the same conclusion, but it's a different interest. And so you have to have somebody on the other side to move cases. And as y'all well know, nothing is more frustrating to the public, to victims, to defendants, to families, to judges, to police officers, to the community, than watching cases stagnate in the court system. And also watching individuals who ought to have their day in court, victims as well as defendants, not get that day in court because there's nobody to talk about the case. So that's the best I can do to sum it up. You have to have skilled people on both sides to make it work.
And if there were furlough days where the PDs were unable to do their jobs because they were instructed to take those days off effectively without pay, and those days were significant, a month or longer, how would that impact the criminal justice system towards the end,
Slows down everything. Slows down preliminary hearings, slows down plea negotiations, slows down jury trials, slows down the process, creates a backlog that you don't want to have. One of the things that I insisted upon in my circuit is that we not have a backlog, and the only way we could do it is by working cooperatively. And we had disagreements, make no mistake about it. Sometimes there were intense discussions with the public defender about what the proper disposition of a case should be. But you have to have those people to talk to. It is labor intensive. It doesn't matter how much money the legislature invests in computers. If there aren't people there to do the work inside that courtroom, nothing gets done.
Thank you, Director. All right, having no questions from members of the committee, we will move on to our next presentation, which happens to be the public defenders. So thank you for that introduction to their team. Thank you, Director. Mark, thank you very much for being here. Ms. Kemp, thank you for joining us. Jim Monique, the pre-show was probably worth the watch, wasn't it?
Yes. I want to thank everyone for their support, Chairman Welch and the committee, along with Judge Zagrua, and of course Pete, our friend from across the bar, for supporting what we do as public defenders, because we're all critical stakeholders in making sure that the criminal justice system works. I wanted to thank, of course, Representative Williams for the shout out. I'm a veteran myself, and I like to say that, I'm a daughter of a veteran. I'm from a military family, and one of the things that we have done is we've committed ourselves to public service. Being a public defender is a continuation of that public service. And just like soldiers who stand on the front line, for the United States, public defenders stand on the front line for the Constitution. So I want to make sure that we emphasize that we all work together. And as Pete said, we may be adversaries when we're in court, but not when we're on this level, because we understand this is what makes the system work for everyone.
So that adversarial relationship is what the Constitution demands.
Yes.
Yes. If you would, Terry, thank you for being here as well. It's good to see you. Interim Director Rogers, would you do the honors of introducing, I think, the lady that will be coming behind you? I just want to make sure we introduce her and recognize her.
Yes,
Ms.
we
Ali.
do. We have Omotaya Ali, who will be coming from Fulton County. She's the juvenile administrator there, a former public defender, who will be coming in next week. It's a week from Monday.
Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Ali. Nice to see you here. I look forward to working with you in the future. Jimmy, thank you very much for that. And if you would, we'll go ahead and turn to our public defenders. I got to find the track sheet. 20, section 20. Thanks. Page 20, section 37. Thank you, Courtney. We had a changing of the guard up here, and Courtney's come in to take over. So if you will, just run through the budget request and the cuts that are being made to the Public Defender's Office.
And in coming back, we talked previously about some of the reductions that we were able to make out of the 4%, which got us to about 1.1%. And those are reflected, some of those are reflected here for the first part of FY21. Those include eliminating one vacant secretary position, that's at 37.1.4, and also at 37.1.5, reducing funds by eliminating some mobile phones and hotspots. We have reduced training expenses. We have a contract, of course, to plan ahead for our annual conference. We cancel that. And so you see on the right on line 37.1.6, the reduction in those training expenses. And we also have some attended purchase card expenses that go along with training. That's just a little over $1,000. That's at 37.1.7. And all of those are in Program 1, which are more statewide central office functions. And then we've continued the reduction in the contract rates. We talked about that before. Right now, we don't pay our contract attorneys a lot, but with the 4%, we knew we had to reduce that since we are 93% representational, where there's staff, contract attorneys, interpreters, or experts. So we reduced the contracts and amended FY20, and we will continue to reduce those in FY21. That's $360,000. In both Program 1 and Program 2, in regards to the freezing of the vacant positions, we currently statewide have 21 as of today. One was approved today for Cordeal. So we have 21 vacant positions open. So with those positions, the amounts that are shown there appear to be for maybe 50-some positions. But we right now have 22 positions open. With that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
Director Rogers, what is the, tell me about the turnover rates, how they have changed over time since 2015? So
following 2015, we began to go on to a salary schedule where we actually got parity with the assistant district attorneys. And because of that, our turnover rate went from about 25% for state-funded attorneys. It actually increased even for our county-funded because of the morale looking at this as a career. And it moved up from 25%, and then it went to 17%. That's following the salary schedule. So we've seen a great boost in morale. The turnover rate went down. We now have people staying longer, which of course reduces our training cost and the disruption in court.
And the committee has also added training cost into the system. I think we did that 2 years ago, maybe it was, that we started providing for your annual conference where PDs can come together and get additional training that they were not receiving otherwise. How has that affected morale within the organization?
Well, I want to thank the committee for doing that. It really has made a significant difference in how our assistant public defenders, even our staff conflict defenders feel, because while PAC has 2 conferences per year where they get training, they learn techniques, they learn skills. We didn't have, up until we received that appropriation, the ability to have an annual conference where we got everyone together. We were doing it just piecemeal. And so by having a conference, we get the actual training, but we also get the opportunity for folks to come from across the state and share best practices, not just the techniques of the law. And that has greatly improved our practice, our retention, and our recruitment.
Does tell us, when in 2015 there was a Cordeal order settlement, so that was there was a lawsuit filed against the state, against the governor, regarding juvenile defense in Cordeal. Could you just very briefly state what that was about, and then what lawsuits have been filed, if any, since then?
Well, I'll start off by saying I'm very happy to report that we haven't had any lawsuits since that time, but the lawsuit involving Cordeal was NP X-Rail Darden, and it actually involved adult attorneys in Superior Court as well as juvenile attorneys. Cordeal, as you may know, speaking of rural areas, is one of the poorest not only in Georgia, but in the nation. And so the county was not able to provide what we have many times with our county partners across the state, additional public defenders, investigators, and administrators. Because of that, we were in a situation where the pace and the rate of cases in the Superior Court as well as in juvenile court was not being met by what we have as the minimum staff that the state provides. We were sued by the Southern Center along with some private firms, and as a result of that, let me back up one moment. One of the challenges they had in juvenile court, which I think is really important to emphasize, was that because they didn't have someone who was in juvenile court who could meet with the clients, and of course there's that quicker turnaround. We're talking about 48, 72 hours. You have to meet with the family. You have to look for services. Because that wasn't happening, then you had juveniles that were sitting either in detention, they weren't getting representation, and they were getting outcomes in their cases that involved detention and harsher sentences. The Department of Justice weighed in on that to show the import of that problem, and then we ended up settling along with the county, and that settlement involved the state providing one additional attorney to help out, and the county providing one additional attorney and an investigator, because that was one of the challenges too. They weren't investigating cases. What that showed us as we went back and looked at the representation that we're providing across the state is that we have to be very mindful in our rural areas that while we depend on the county heavily to shore up what the state does not provide, because the state's provision of either APDs, investigators, and administrators is a baseline. But not all counties can provide in the same way. So if we want to make sure that there is representation across the state, we have to make sure we have the baseline, and then we make sure that we work with our county partners to go from there.
Vice Chair Rogers.
Yes, ma'am. Director Rogers, nice last name. Yeah. Is that R-O-G-E-R-S or R-O-D-G?
It's the R-O-D-G-E-R-S.
You're a rich Rogers. Yeah. We can't afford the D's.
It's my husband. It's not me.
All right. Okay. You mentioned something about the training and the conferences and
yes.
that you've been going to, which I think is great. One of the things I was just out of curiosity, juvenile justice, a couple of other places have gone to sort of a mode now where rather than sending people all over the place, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But what they're doing is they're bringing people in and they're having like teletraining and things like that. Have you guys done any of that, exploring any of that, where you're bringing in people for lunch and maybe dividing it up into sections to where people have a chance?
We have done that. In addition to the baseline training that we have, let me say for the state bar, for those who are not attorneys, 6 hours of the state bar requirements of the 12 CLEs for attorneys per year need to be in person. So if you're doing it through that kind of training, it could qualify. So for our conference, which was we'll get everyone together, we had different tracks. There's only so much specialization you can do there. So we had additional training,
sure.
And we do that through webinars, through that type of telelearning. We can build on to that as well, and we've attempted to do that where we can to make sure we have that for the specialty areas.
What's been the reaction from your folks? They like it?
They do. One of the challenges that we had is because we are all over the state, even when there are folks who can come to the conference, there's still folks who cannot, and there may be issues that arise, especially with new decisions in the law, new processes that we need to get information out to individuals, and it's not just to email. There needs to be some training. So we're building that out, as well as building a library on our intranet so that people can go when specific issues come up, they can go and see recordings of trainings that have occurred.
Well, this is the second time that I've listened to you, and I'm very impressed with the job you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's the Rogers.
Representative Bruce.
Hi there. I don't have the same last name, but I have the first name.
You need a new caucus.
Hey. How involved is your department in pretrial intervention, if at all?
Well, we are, and it depends, the level of it varies across the state, but when we're talking about pretrial, when we talk about diversion, many times in our local areas we're getting involved, we're having conversations with the district attorneys in advance when we're developing programs so that we can intervene them depending on the staffing of the office. That may vary, and the type of programs involved, that may vary.
The reason I was asking, you know, as I look at all of these budgets, you know, it seems like we're spending a lot on the after effect as opposed to the before effect. And if we can keep some of these kids out of the system, that would be great. And it would seem like that would be less expensive than some of the punitive things that we have in place. That's why I was trying to see to what extent we were involved in the pretrial.
It does vary across the state because it depends on the staffing capability of the office. They're always there advocating for that, and they'll work with it, but it does depend on that. And I absolutely agree. I have a master's in criminal justice, but my specialty is juvenile justice, and that's where my heart lies. I believe if you catch them on the front end, you won't have to deal with them on the back end. And that's just a shift in the way we do policy because we have to take that component seriously.
Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director ROD, good to have you. Appreciate you. I've listened very closely to you now twice. Very impressed. I hope our new director, would hope to speak with her soon. One thing that I wanted to say is when I first got to the legislature, we went through a very bloody fight to even stand up public defenders with state money. It was not pretty. It was one of the most vicious fights we had here in the early days. And there was intense fighting to keep from putting state money out at all for public defenders. We were primarily under the contract system. And it's not true now, most of them have gone by the wayside, but lawyers that couldn't make a living anyplace else ended up getting a little contract from Department of Public Defenders. Thank you all for your upgrades and what you're doing to make the Constitution come alive. It's not easy sometimes, and I've had a chance to see some folk that you've had to defend. It ain't easy. So, but I appreciate the effort and appreciate what you're doing, particularly in rural Georgia, where justice sometimes is a little slow, but you do a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Following up on the rural Georgia comments, I think that the council's been pushing, or the defender's office has been pushing the juvenile court PDs, the assistant public defenders for juvenile courts. Those have also been focused in rural areas. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so again, following up on what Representative Williams had said with the ADAs before and the law clerks when talking to superior courts, there has been a concerted effort amongst all three organizations to try to push those new positions into the rural area of Georgia, which coincides with the efforts that the House members like Mr. Williams and others have had on trying to focus attention on rural Georgia. Let me ask you about the parity. Now, you've heard what Director Skandalakis has said regarding a pay increase to the PDs, to the ADAs. What would be the commensurate amount of money to ensure that we have pay parity going forward, so we could have that number as we contemplate what adjustments we would want to make to your budget? I know we have $1,000 in here for people that are earning $40,000 or less, but as you can see, that number is about $138,000. That is not commensurate with what the director for PAC is asking for their ADA. So could you elucidate us on that?
And Terry has that number.
Sure, we'll need $796,687.
Say one more time.
$796,687.50.
That's helpful. Also, how many juvenile court PDs are still needed to round out and to close out, so that every circuit, at least every circuit, would have a state juvenile court sponsored
9.
PD? Okay, 9. All right. And then on the conflicts, could you explain to the committee the history of the funding of conflict attorneys? So in this context, we're talking about where multiple defendants are charged as associated with the same crime. And your office, the APD cannot represent all three of them. They have to have separate representation, even among themselves. So in that context, you hire out and you have a conflict attorney that you're contracting with that would represent the other co-defendants. And in that context, you have to pay that out. Previously, we were using administrative fees that we were having to use to pay those. Tell us a little bit about that history and what has transpired in the recent years, and then what the budget cuts that are proposed would do to those conflict attorneys.
Well, we'll start back before when we actually had a crisis in conflicts where after FAO 10-1 was passed by the Georgia Supreme Court. And what that said is our law offices, each of our circuit public defenders operates as a law office. But we had built in essentially a division within those offices in the way that they handle conflict cases. Now, that's an ethical conflict, which means as an attorney, I am prohibited from representing the other individuals. It's not just a choice. And it's maybe more than just a co-defendant case, especially in the rural areas. Regrettably, we tend to have generational issues. We tend to kind of circulate through the same group of people so that there are conflicts, even with one being a witness, this trial being a victim, the next trial being the defendant. So we tend to get a lot of those. When FAO 10-1 was passed by the Georgia Supreme Court, it said that in a circuit public defender office, then as attorneys, we are compelled to send those cases out to another private attorney. Not the same private attorney, but different private attorneys if there's no staffed conflict office there. As a result, we had to change the way that we were doing business. We projected that it was going to cause the cost to skyrocket, and it did because it was a different infrastructure for delivery. And that increased it. We ended up needing more money over the course of a period of time because we could not afford it. Money was put back into our budget. If you look back, you'll see that we were appropriated over FY 16 and 17, a little over $6 million in funds. They were one-time allotments, but they were put into our base budget to cover the cost of the additional cases. With that, we were able to create an effective delivery system and fee schedule for private attorneys. Now, of course, we don't pay market rates. I say we pay public defender rates to private attorneys. So there's always, an issue with how much we pay because we also don't provide mileage for individuals traveling around. So we found individuals who were qualified to take these cases to go across the state for us. And what we have now after negotiating those rates, like I said, they're somewhat minimal. I don't want to oversell what we're able to provide to them. But we have, in amended FY20, gone back to say for cases that are not near completion based under the old rate, that we're going to reduce the amount that we're going to pay you for cases. That would roll into the next year. So the practical impact of that, as has already been communicated by the attorneys, are we're going to have less attorneys who'll take the cases, or we will not be able to find attorneys who maybe meet the quality levels of what we need. And if we have to end up taking the cases back, we still have to find attorneys to give those cases to.
And
so these are clients we're talking about.
And what do you have a number figure or a dollar amount for what would be needed to make that to right that ship?
The reduction is $360, so that $360 would right the ship, and I think the contractors we have are fine with being stable.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of things. First is, in listening to the discussion about rural challenges, I'm a Metro Atlanta legislator and lawyer, but I've taken on a couple of pro bono cases in rural Georgia, to include one in Chris County. To be candid, eminently frustrating. Minor case, simple facts, and it took me 5 months to resolve it when it should have been resolved in like 30 minutes. So I don't know if a lot of your public defenders are feeling that frustration too. I think public defenders often get that they're overworked and delaying the system and everything else, but my experience was vastly different. As a defense counsel, very easy to identify the issues and just, this is what the resolution should be, and had massive difficulty getting the prosecutor to spend like 10 minutes on it. It was very eye-opening. And the other experience that I had from Representative Williams' area is in a juvenile justice case, a young man with autism who clearly should not be going into a detention type system. Without question, objectively, what this person needs is some type of counseling and assistance. But in that part of the state, it's not available. Probably the closest that's available is to drive to Savannah. And it just really opened my eyes to, like, how do we get resources in a way that helps us make smart, final criminal justice decisions. And so both more comments, but if you have reaction to those, I would certainly appreciate it. And then the last thing is just on this contracts issue of maybe trying to encourage, as a state, more lawyers to take cases on in a public service type of way, either pro-service or by accepting the lower rates. Can you provide to us just a little bit more context? And I think you've done it before, but it'd be helpful to have a refresher of, is it by case? So for example, you get $5,000, $10,000 by case. Is it by hour? Can you just give us some context in terms of the dollars and how that's being managed for those attorneys?
Yes.
Thanks.
So I'll start with the issue about the resources. Just as the fact of it is that impacts our contract attorneys as well as our public defenders, because getting resources to resolve cases, and the experience you had, not with the juvenile case, but with the other case, and taking so much time, that factors into how we recruit and retain private attorneys to serve as contract attorneys. So that's just the reality of the world that we live in. As far as the specific resources to juveniles, that applies to adults as well. We were talking about accountability courts earlier, especially the veteran courts and mental health courts. The resources are such that you could lobby for your client and advocate for your client to get an outcome in sentencing that would benefit the community and them, but they can't get to the service provider. I mean, realistically, they can't get there because we're talking about people who are poor in rural areas. It's not necessarily Fulton County where you can take the bus to get there. It just doesn't happen. So that's the reality that we're working in with everything that we do. And so when we're talking about how we pay contractors, we had a kind of a flat fee, a contract where you would take so many cases, and the thought was that we'd make sure that you covered a certain area. We could ensure that if a case came up, because there's a short time frame even for adult cases to get someone on the case, we knew we could call you because you were covering that court. We've started to move away from that as much as we can within our financial boundaries and enter per case agreements. The challenge with that is that you have to have a person who's constantly on call when things come up. It's even more challenging when it's a juvenile case, but that's what we're trying to move to. When you do it per case, though, and you look at the amount per case and you say, this is what I'm going to do in a case, it takes a lot more negotiation there because people want to look more at the cases than say, I know that I'm going to get this amount per month because I've agreed to take this many cases and cover the courts. And we have contract attorneys that are covering not just courts in a county, but area. So they're doing regions, so it's like maybe a couple of circuits, which causes more problems with getting cases scheduled. But we can't find, especially in the rural areas, attorneys that will cover that area for what we pay.
Can you give us examples of actual dollars for certain parts of the state?
Yes, Terry can speak to what we pay
Per
under the
case?
old rate for the
Per case is about $450, but now it's reduced to $360
Per case, not per hour, per case.
We pay per case.
If it's a murder case or
And if it's a murder case, it will go up to $2,000
For the case?
for the case, the whole case to disposition.
Send me back my application.
Okay.
And a juvenile case.
Juvenile cases are around $400 per case.
indulge us, murder case, on average, massive amounts of work, correct?
Yeah.
So just ballpark the hours that we're asking attorneys to put in for that. 50, 100?
As many as needed.
It's
As many as needed.
for
It's as many as needed. It is the public defender pro bono rate.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and those are the contract rates for hiring someone in a conflict situation.
Correct.
So, otherwise, the staff, the public defenders are taking all those cases, handling. You have a special unit that deals with death penalty cases and murder cases. Is that correct?
For death penalty cases, for murder cases, we do not. We only have, we have 2 full-staffed offices for conflict attorneys. They're in Fulton County and DeKalb. Because of the number of cases, they only focus in those areas. And then we have 4 other conflict offices where we have about 2 individuals in each of those offices. They're staffed. So that means those staffed conflict attorneys, whether it's 1 or 2, would have to pick up cases if they could. If they're multiple co-defendants, we just have to try to figure out how we would get someone to represent those other individuals if we can't get a contract attorney to do it.
Let me follow up on an issue that's in here. You have a relocation, some cost here associated with relocation. Explain to me what the plan is here and how is that going to be a cost savings? Because don't you have space in the bar offices currently, State Bar?
We do. We have 5 of our units in the State Bar Building, and we've been there since the inception of our agency in 2005. So we have the central office, the executive offices, the statewide administrative services, like payroll, HR, fiscal. We also have the Office of Mental Health Advocate. We have the state level services offices. That's the administrative offices that oversees and coordinates all of the conflict appointments. Then we have 2 capital offices. We have the main capital defender as well as a conflict capital defender. So we're all located in different parts of the State Bar Building. To save funds as far as the central office, and it equals out to maybe $1 and some cent per square foot because we need it to expand. We have identified where the Court of Appeals Clerk of Court and the chambers were, which is the old health building, actually right across the street. And so the central executive offices, Office of Mental Health Advocate, state level services, and the appellate division could move to that office. Our 2 capital offices, though, would not sit on Capitol Hill. They would stay at the State Bar Building. So what it would amount to is not a cost realization in the short term, but in long term, per square foot, it would reduce the cost for the central offices.
So what is the rent payment at the State Bar?
I don't have the
$550,000
per year.
per year.
And we don't have the final.
You would think that we were giving that pro bono. I mean, I honestly was thinking that that rental space was free.
Yeah. It is not. The one thing that we do get with the facility is we get all of the space. Oh, I'm sorry.
Representative Gravel, you wanted to hear the number again, right?
Okay.
$550,000.
$550,000 a year.
Per year.
And so we have 3 floors in the State Bar Building, and we get the training rooms and conference rooms as a part of staying at the building.
How many in the training, if I may,
Yeah, go ahead and put your light on.
how many attorneys are over there utilizing those 3? I mean, that are full-time there?
That are full-time attorneys. We have our Metro Conflict Office, and I'm just thinking of the offices now, representational units. We have the Metro Conflict, which is a trial office, and they have about 7 staff attorneys. We have the Office of Mental Health Advocate, which has 4 attorneys working in it. We have Appellate, which has 12 attorneys. And the capital defenders. The main capital defender has about 15, between 10 and 15, and then there's a conflict capital, which has a team, which is about 3 to 4 attorneys. We're talking about attorneys.
So the State Bar funded through dues that every licensing fees, that effectively dues from every lawyer across the entire state of Georgia to fund and pay for effectively prime real estate in downtown Atlanta off of Marietta Street, is charging the public defenders who are doing, I think, heroic work across the state, protecting our Constitution for the betterment of every single lawyer, whether you're a prosecuting attorney or a plaintiff's attorney, bringing in personal injury cases, providing this service to the state of Georgia is having to pay out what amounts to, 8 to 10 positions in rent.
Yes.
And so our bar that requires, that urges us to take on 50 hours of pro bono work every year can't come off the hip in providing free rent to our PDs. Is that where we are?
Yes. I think it sounds better if you say charging them over $500,000.
Yeah, he's saying charging you over $500,000 in rent and expecting lawyers to do pro bono work and incentive work at $400 a case or $360 a case or $200 or $2,000 a case, and we're charging rent. I wish there was someone from the bar here. I could shame them right now. That's unacceptable. That's something that, I just, because now we're shifting the cost. What we're doing is by moving you over, we may save some money in rents, but it's nominal. I mean, you're still paying rents, and we're paying rents to the state, to the GBA. We're paying to the building authority, so you're still paying the rent. It may be a little lower. There may be some cost savings of having people associated, but you're still not going to have all the offices located in the same location anyway.
Correct.
So, I don't think you're capturing as much of a net savings as one would think, and that's, to me, that's just shameful that the bar is charging that. I'm embarrassed for our organization. Go ahead.
Do you know if the bar building is paid for? I remember when it was bought some time ago. I was under the impression that the bar building is paid for, so that would make this issue even more concerning.
Yeah,
I believe that it is.
I think it's paid off. Yeah.
Then I share your sentiment.
Did the public defenders pay it off?
Well, I think that's something we need to take up with the bar board.
I agree.
PAC was there before we were there.
You already did in protest, didn't you? You already turned it in. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I think that's disappointing. So, other questions from Interim Director Rogers?
Question.
Yeah.
I came in the middle of this, but the bar is a private entity, correct? But is the building they're in a state property?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No. What we were taking was that the lawyers in the state are required, and the bar rules are, it's strongly suggested, I should say, to take on 50 hours of pro bono work per year. So we're supposed to be doing some of the goodwill that PDs are doing, and some of the goodwill that Representative Holcomb is doing, that where you're donating your time and your energies towards a public defense work or some kind of work in the community that helps with the criminal justice system or helps others with kinship care issues or what have you. And so the very organizations that's requiring all of us to pay dues and then give time pro bono is not giving space pro bono to the PDs, and that's the disturbing contrast we're drawing. Representative Holcomb had asked, why his cases had been delayed, and he really didn't answer that question, but I think it has something to do with you, not anybody else.
Yeah.
There was a commonality in all of that. I just wanted to make that observation.
Here I thought we were really making some progress.
I meant that in jest. Thank you, Interim Director. I appreciate the presentation. Ms. Radford, thank you very much for helping us out with the numbers. See no other questions from members. We'll move on to our last topic, which is Department of Corrections. No, that's fine. We'll move to I do have a person that has signed up. I think Maisie Lynn Causey wanted to speak with respect to public defenders. While Commissioner Ward is coming up, let me give you some time to speak, but we'll keep it somewhat short if we can.
Lawyer with a mic is a problem, but I'll try to read so that, excuse my reading, but it'll keep me fast. I do represent GACTL. We are the nation's largest member-supported criminal defense organization. Of our over 1,600 members, about 40% here in Georgia are public defenders. And as you know, they are the constitutional officers who are guarding life and liberty in courtrooms across our country at this very moment. There's simply no replacement for them. And as you know, they handle upwards of 90% of the cases throughout our state. We believe and we appreciate so much the pay parity that you have brought to bear on those offices, but we think that respectfully that's just not enough. We get reports from our membership, like the one I received the other day, who describes it to me this way. She changed jobs from a state public defender position, I believe it actually might have been county funded, but now she's at the federal defenders program. And she said, you know, my intellect, my work ethic, they have not changed. But what has changed is that I now work in a well-resourced environment. She has support staff. She has the assistance of a paralegal. She has the assurance that an investigator will be assigned to every case she has. And she has a manageable caseload. She carries about 20 cases at a time. The office where she was before, she carried about 100 at a time, and she felt very lucky because a lot of her colleagues were carrying 200 to 300 cases. And these are felony cases. These are complex cases. These are gang cases. These are murder cases. These are not misdemeanor cases that she was carrying. So for her, excuse me, the quality of her representation has increased, but also just her sense of confidence walking into a courtroom prepared to know that she can actually defend the case in the way that it's meant to be defended and not be disadvantaged by a lack of resources. And I don't raise this to call into account your sincere desire to fund these issues, but if it can't only be focused on the pay for the lawyers in the offices. And you've mentioned, Director Rogers mentioned that the training deficit, in light of the 6 hours of mandatory training that has to happen in person, there's only so much that can be cut from a training budget. And I would just want to underscore that this goes beyond mere compliance with bar mandates. This is an investment in the state's workforce. These are the state's employees doing the state's business, and they should be well trained and they should be professionally trained. And it shouldn't have to happen in Band-Aid, pull them up, find a way to do it on the back of a cocktail napkin or a video away. They should get the training that they need to be the best lawyers that they can be in those courtrooms. A key aspect of GACTL's work is providing training. We have always substantially cut our training rates for public defenders. This year we have cut them substantially more in light of the fiscal concerns of GPDC. We can't sustain that over the long haul either. We can't be the supplement to their budget for training, although we really do want to support their work and we're doing what we can in the short term here. I'd also like to underscore the complex cases that require the conflict attorneys to represent the clients charged in these cases. As you heard the numbers, they're startling. And in a prior hearing, Ms. Rogers had done some work to get an hourly rate for those flat fees we talked about earlier, and they were $45 an hour for out-of-court time, $65 an hour for in-court time. I really did look to see if I could find another professional licensed position in our state that makes such paltry sums of money for their expertise. And I got to tell you, even the very talented men and women in the state who cut and style our hair make more by the hour than these conflict attorneys are making, representing people who are facing jail and significant impacts to their liberty. The idea that the cuts that are in play right now could cause a 6-week furlough ought to be terrifying. That is a constitutionally, that is a matter of constitutional proportions. The litigation that could come if these offices close down for 6 weeks. And let's not kid ourselves. If furloughs happen for 4 to 6 weeks based on the underfunding of the Public Defender Council, those lawyers will not be there to return to court at the end of that 6 weeks. They don't have the savings in their bank accounts to withstand that kind of a furlough. We will be shutting down the system. This won't be just a pause button like a one-day furlough might be. This would be a shutdown of our entire system. In addition, the lack of funding of the vacant positions is I realize on paper might seem like a good solution, But the vacancies around our state in the rural areas, I spoke to one of our members who's in Southwest Georgia and represents one of these unfunded positions. And she understands that when you look and see that a position's been unfunded for over a year, that is a concern and makes you wonder, do we really need that position? They really need that position. They just can't find someone to go live in a more remote area for the entry-level pay that's provided. You know, when you're recruiting young lawyers out of law school, they're coming to the cities of our state. They're not choosing to go to the smaller towns, unfortunately. And until we can draw them there, they can't come. But if they finally want to relocate and go there, we need to have a position available for them. These lawyers are the unsung heroes across our state. And I just implore you to consider how much more we can ask of them. Please fully fund this agency. The people of Georgia need it, and the Constitution simply demands it. And I really do appreciate your time. I know this is a little out of the ordinary to accept public comment, and I would be available to anyone that has additional questions about ways that we could partner to help, like I said, with the training even further or other aspects of their representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Causey. While the Department of Corrections comes forward, I'd like to recognize that Representative Rick Williams and Mike Chokas and Josh McLaurin are here. I'm sorry? Yeah, I already recognize them. They, Mike and Rick and Josh, y'all just stand up for a second. I want to, everybody's. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Appreciate you. Oh, we already had Bob. You know, if you got here on time, yeah, you know, all three of you came in late, so I'm just, you know, late to the party. So, follow your minority leader. He'll lead you right where you need to be. All right, thank you. Commissioner Ward, good to see you. Last presentation, we're going to be looking at our fiscal year 2021 budget. This is section 19 of your track sheet and the budget, and it also begins on page 9. And Courtney is handing out a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation for us to go through as we want to move through this. And with that, Commissioner Ward, thank you very much for being here. Alan, thank you for being here as well. Appreciate you both making the trip. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Commissioner, and let you present the budget.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to present our fiscal year 21 budget. As you stated earlier, it's going to start in section 19, which begins on page 9 and runs through page 11 of your tracking sheets. Kind of like we did the amended 20 budget, we're going to break it down into 6 categories so it can kind of flow pretty good. One being broken down in 1 is statewide changes, 2 leveraging technology, 3 business process improvement, and 4 facility management, 5 revenue, and 6 the governor's recommendation. First up, we'll have the statewide changes. The first recommendation is an adjustment of $930,258 for employee share of TRS, which is spread across 3 programs. The next item is a reduction of $17,305 for cybersecurity insurance premiums in the administration program. And the final piece of the another piece of the statewide change is a reduction of $794,725 for GTA administrative fees for GATS contract management, and spread across most programs. And the last statewide change is an increase of $10,845,690, and that's for the $1,000 pay raise for full-time regular employees with current salaries of $40,000 or less. This increase will help with recruitment and retention of correction officers. Currently, we have 6,844 employees who are eligible for the increase. Of these, 72% are sworn positions and 98% work behind the wire. And it's a breakdown of who's going to get those. Next, I would like to discuss the administration program budget, starting out with the business process improvements, 19.2.5. Again, that's reducing 3 IT contract positions. 19.2.6, converting the victim services manager position to a clerical position. to continue supporting pardons and parole with 2 clerical positions. Again, like I stated earlier in a minute, that was we just took out a manager's position and converted that into a clerical position. 19.2.7, the department is freezing 18 vacant administration program positions. 19.29, we have assigned our mobile construction teams to facilities near our residents. This reduction reflects 1 position that was moved to the state prison program. 19.2.8, we combined several staff training classes to reduce travel and course-related costs for supplies and materials. 19.2.10, the department moved 4 education administrative positions to direct instruction inside of facilities. The next items is the governor's recommendation. That's 19.2.11. This is an additional reduction to the travel budget recommended by the governor. This total reduction is $2,510,916 for the admin program. Next, I would like to move to the detention center program, business process improvements. That's 19.3.4. Through business process improvements, we are moving 1 position to a vacant position inside a facility for an annual savings of $45,148. Next, leveraging technology, 19.3.3. Our current timekeeping system does not provide real-time management information for managers and supervisors to monitor hours worked. FY19, as we spoke previously, we spent over $26 million in FLS overtime expenses. The department piloted Chronos in 1 location that, again, like we talked about, reduced FLSA overtime by over 50%, drop in that overtime payout. The department has started the transition to Chronos and will be complete by the early fiscal year 21. Total projected FY21 FLSA savings in this program is projected to be $513,870. Next, I would like to discuss the health program budget. That is 19.5.4 and 19.5.5. As we talked about last year, we bid our mental and dental health contract. Centurion was the successful bidder and assumed responsibility for all existing GDC mental health counselors, dental health professionals, and related administrative staff. 19.5.4, by transferring those positions to that vendor, we were able to freeze 9 vacant positions for a FY21 cost savings of $353,329. 19.5.3 reflects a savings of transferring 95 positions to that Centurion contract for a reduction in savings of $4,996,333. Next, 19.5.6, we realized annual savings by relocating 11 mental health unit managers to security positions. We had the annual savings of $690,390. Also, due to the increasing physical health care costs of the agency, hired a consultant to evaluate our health care delivery model. The department will review their results to determine if changes to our delivery model can help reduce costs while maintaining necessary levels of care. Next, I would like to review our offender management program. That is 19.6.3. The department now requires a GED, a vocational certificate, prior to an offender being placed in a county facility. This change in policy resulted in an annual savings of $1,325,000. And that's, again, by changing the policy requiring an offender to get his GED or his vocational trade prior to going to a county count. Next slide is our private prison program. As you know, in FY19, the General Assembly provided an increase in the operating expense for private prisons. This was a 5% salary increase for correction officer. However, the increase was not fully funded for one of our vendors. 19.7.1, the governor is recommending an increase for private prison operating funds of $2,500,000 for fiscal year 21. This will complete the funding of the 5% increase. Next, I would like to review state prison program business process improvements. 19.8.5 and 19.8.7. I discussed the consolidation of our financial and administrative function in my review of our amended FY20 budget. The department implemented these changes beginning in November of 2019. We continue to train and assist the staff in their new roles. Learning new processes takes time, and we have focused on the success of our plan. The annualized saving for FY21 is $9,728,585. And Mr. Representative Williams, we talked last time about the affected employees, how we reached out to those employees and how they're doing a new job. This week we started reaching out to all those individuals, getting input and see how they're transitioning to those new roles. And I just want to update you on that. Reduction in stats, like I say, with 85 positions was affected. All affected employees were offered mission critical position within the department. And as I stated earlier in my FY20 amended budget hearing, only 23 affected individuals because of those reductions, and those individuals were offered position but chose to go do something else. Okay. Next, 19.8.6, freezing vacancies. The department froze 193 non-security, non-critical vacancies for an annualized savings of $8,984,763. 19.8.15, consolidating training. The department is utilizing a more online training and reducing the frequency of some courses. Overall, this will result in reduced travel and vehicle operating expenses. One position will reduce to a lower level trainer position with an annual savings of $456,049. Next, 19.8.9, reducing part-time staff. The department is reviewing all part-time positions to further reduce personnel services expenses, and we're going to do that through attrition, and we project a savings of $2,654,394. Next, 19.8.10, 19.8.11, and 19.8.13 is education. The department converted 26 teaching positions to instructors. The department identified 7 education administrative positions that were moved to direct instruction inside of facilities. Also, the charter high school program is now partially formally funded. This reduction aligns state funding with actual expenditures. So we saw annualized savings of $1,838,749 by doing that. Next, 19.8.12, telecommunication costs. The department audited all technology expenditures to include eliminating unnecessary computer hardware and software. The department also reduced the number of phones and other wireless devices. We saw an annual savings of $2,030,354 by doing that. 19.8.17, this is an annualized savings of $3,649,314 in the state prison program portion of the conversion of mobile construction staff being assigned to facilities near their residents. This resulted in 45 positions being assigned to a facility in the area, reducing travel expenses. As you know, mobile construction is a real big part of what we do. We build state patrol barracks, refurbish state courthouses, sometimes helping building senior citizens, centers, refurbishing softball field for local schools and things. Those are going to continue to happen. But what we did, we just regionalized that process and assigned those individuals to facilities. So we cut out that travel and that per diem cost of them staying in hotels and having to pay them for meals. What they do now, they work in an area near their home. They come to a facility, park their personal vehicles, get in a state vehicle, get the details, and go to that work site, and then come back home in the afternoon and sleep in their own beds at night. Okay. Next, on 19.8.14, reduce travel through consolidating training and foregoing conferences for annualized savings of $2,111,326 annually. Next, I would like to discuss how we leverage technology to reduce expenses. 19.8.4, timekeeping system. Our projected annual savings is $16,199,162 due to a reduction in FLSA by utilizing Chronos to manage the schedule and tracking of hours worked by employees. As you know, last fiscal year we spent over $26 million in FLSA overtime. By using the Chronos system, we can do real-time managing or real-time timekeeping. With our old timekeeping, previous timekeeping solutions, it was almost 3 pay cycles before we realized how much a person had accrued for FLSA overtime. With the Chronos system, if an individual, right now, if an officer accrues over 171 hours in a 28-day cycle, we have to pay time and a half for that individual. With Chronos, it's real-time management. Say, for instance, we had an officer that was coming up on 171 hours, warden or deputy warden could get that individual off without working him over. If he had a position that they need to work some overtime with, they could go get an individual who had not was coming up on 171 hours to better manage that. We're not completely doing away with overtime, but we have a better system of managing overtime and making sure that we're maximizing what we do with our FLSA overtime. Okay. Next is the virtual courts, 19.8.8. I couldn't have been teed up better by the previous presentations about virtual courts. As you know, GDC, we transport offenders to and from court for more than 17,400 hearings per year. Video conferencing for these hearings, as well as many more cases, reduce travel expenses, employee overtime, and improve security. Our projected savings for fiscal year 21 is $3.5 million by just going to video hearings. Right now, we have to, again, travel to take a person for a 5-minute first appearance at court. We can do it video conferencing. He goes up front, do it, go back to his dormitory. And don't have to get him up at 4 o'clock in the morning, get 2 officers to put him on the bus and transport him to a hearing. Implementation status, right now we have 9 of the 49 judicial circuits that are currently holding video hearings. Our goal is to have 50% of the circuits on board by June the 20th, 2020. I mean, it's catching on real quickly with all the circuits, and everybody's on board with that. Next, revenue increase to other funds offsetting state appropriations. 19.8.20 work details. FY20 savings is going to be $4,916,258. This is the annualized saving by increasing the annual contract to cover actual costs of a correction officer. Only thing we're doing is we're just charging for the cost of the correction officer who supervises that detail on a daily basis to provide that coverage for those work details. And that's going to give us a cost savings of $4,916,258. Next is 19.8.16. That's the commissary. The average pricing is a minimum of 40% less than the retail pricing. So what we're going to do, we're going to increase the sale of our items in the commissary by 2 cents per item, which will have an annualized increase in savings of over $3,549,377. Again, that's 40%, still 40% less than retail on the street for those items. 19.8.18, the governor is also recommending an additional reduction in the amount of $45,810 to meet anticipated expenditures. Next, facility management, 19.8.19, Metro Reentry Facility. This is an increase in funds at the amount of $7,197,555 for the personal services and operating expenses to open Phase 3 of the Metro Reentry Facility here in Atlanta. As you know, every year about almost 8,000 offenders return back to the Metro Atlanta area, in an 8-county area. We opened the Metro Reentry Facility a couple of years ago to for those individuals who are returning back to the Metro Atlanta area, put them there 18 to 12 months prior to their release, bring all the resources there for them, job finding opportunities, job skilling techniques, everything to make sure that they're successful back to reentry into society. If you haven't visited the Metro Reentry Facility, you need to go visit. That is a very unique, dynamic facility. We've had people all the way from Dubai, all over the country, come to see what we're doing at the Metro Reentry Facility, trying to model what we're doing there and take it back to their different states. Also, we have some new TC beds coming online. Smith TC 100 beds. Metro TC, as we talked about, that's going to be another 240-bed transition center located inside the facility. And also, we have again, that's a net gain of 190 new TC beds, because I think I might have it flipped instead, because we had my page out of place because we talked about Metro TC. 19.9.3 Albany TC. We're going to close Albany TC. We closed Albany TC December 1st, 2019. This is an annualized savings of $3,124,357 for the fiscal year 21. As we talked earlier in the minute 20 budget, 38 staff were affected and 150 inmate residents were relocated. 38 staff members were relocated to different positions. In Albany, Albany TC surrounds Lee State Prison, Calhoun State Prison, and Archer State Prison, which is a 50-mile radius. All of those individuals were reassigned to those facilities. We also relocated those 150 residents. At the time we closed, it was 112 residents. We relocated all of those individuals to transit centers throughout the state. 19.9.5, the department is freezing one vacant non-security administrative position for a savings of $39,353. These duties were moved to the regional business office. 19.9.6, this was a GD fast track program funded in fiscal year 2016. Now that GDC is well established in with GD training and testing in the facilities, this fast track training is no longer needed. This resulted in a savings of $275,000 annually. Leveraging technology, 19.9.4. This is projected FLS savings related to the TC program. The FY20 annualized savings is $154,770. Total transaction center program reduction is $3,593,480. Again, that's couping the operational cost of closing the Albany TC is the vast majority of that. And without further ado, that's my budget presentation. Now I'm subject to your questions.
What about bonds? Bond request?
We have that information for you.
All right. Tell us where we are in the slideshow.
It's not in the slideshow. We didn't do the bonds, but we can.
So you don't need any bonds? That's good. Okay.
We need bonds, sir.
That saved us some money. That's
we
good to
need
know.
bonds. The FY 20 bond recommendations, the total bond funding is $32,130,000. Of that, $5 million is for emergency repairs, for sustaining equipment and emergency repairs. Another $9,740,000 for major repairs, renovation, and improvements. $1,595,000 is for hardening, cell blocks and locks and things of that nature. $5,105,000 for video security systems. $1,575,000 for locking control systems. $1,820,000 for water sewer system renovations throughout the state. $2,430,000 is for replacement of 84 vehicles, and there's over 100 and how much mileage for those vehicles? 170,000 miles.
175 is what we do.
175. That's our replacement point for our vehicles. So we replacing 84 vehicles there. $864,000 is to replace 3 buses and 4 medical transport vans. If you know, earlier in my presentation, we have almost 13,000 offenders that are chronic care, and those medical transport vans are much needed for those guys in wheelchairs that go back and forth to clinics and the hospital. $1,185,000 for renovate our fire protection systems at GDCP. $865,000 is for security system improvements at GDCP, and $1,330,000 is for the HVAC for mental health dorms at Valor State Prison. As you know, we do not have HVC through our system, but we do have HVC unit for our mental health units. Those guys are taking mental health medications, so we try to keep them in a cool area because of the medications that they take. And that $1,330,000 is to do the HVC unit for the mental health dorms down at Valdosta State Prison. Next is $620,000 for Metro Transition Center restroom renovation, and that's our female transition center here in the Metro Atlanta area. That's $620,000 to renovate the restroom and bathroom areas for those female offenders. Okay, and that's the total bond request. Again, is $32,130,000.
$32 million.
$32 million. $32,130,000. And subject to your questions at this time, sir.
Representative Williams has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're very smooth today, Commissioner. I did want to note that after about 17, 18 years listening to commissioners, I noticed how your presentation increases in speed each year. Next year, I don't know if you're going to be able to give it as fast as you went this year. But on 19.6.3, I need you to review one more time for me. You're talking about the savings there as it relates to GED testing and vocational certification. Tell me again, and tell me what's the anticipated effect of this.
Only thing I've done with a simple policy change, we were paying our county partners who house our offenders in county camp. We were paying them to give GEDs and vocational certificates for those individuals. What I did, I just changed the criteria for going to the county facility. I made it a prerequisite that you have to have your GED or a vocational skill prior to going to a county camp. And that's twofold. One, they're going to get a better quality individual coming to the county camp. And then also it's an incentive for those individuals to behave better in the prison system, knowing that they have to have the GED or vocational trade to go to a county camp. And so that's what it was. I think it's a win-win for everybody because county camp placement is a desired placement for our offenders because they work, they're outside, and they have a little bit more freedom. Okay.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Chairman Morkheiser? Oh, I'm sorry. It's Mr. Bruce. Representative Bruce.
I just have a quick question. When you were talking about the video, appearing in court via the video, where is the attorney in that process?
The attorney is located in the courtroom with the judge.
Okay, so how does the attorney and the defendant communicate with each other?
If there's a pre-trial or pre-conference, they do it prior to the hearing, and then also we got the DocuSign. If there's any documents being signed, whatever document that's in the court, he has a copy of those documents right there with him also, him or her. Right, so
okay, but if something comes up during the conversation, how does the attorney get to have a private conversation with the defendant?
We have an isolated area next to where we have a courtroom setting with a telephone that's directly connected to the courtroom. The courtroom has that number for them to make that call.
Okay, and that's Mayor Holt. He's my assistant commissioner for facility operation, and he was on the pilot when we initiated this initiative for court hearing. So he's very, very versed in the opposite. Thank you for saving me, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't infringing on the right of the defendant to be able to communicate with his or her attorney.
I mean, explain to what
to go a little bit further,
yes.
the telephone portion was actually the first part that was to the podium.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
The charges are kind of light today, so don't stay too long.
Absolutely. That was an excellent question, and that was one of the first concerns we had. So instead of starting the video court first, we began the telephone conference portion first in an area that's isolated from our staff, and they have the opportunity to have a direct conversation with their attorney, isolated away from our staff. No one's inside of the room except for the inmate. Once he's done, he comes out of the room, and then we can go ahead and begin the hearing. If we have to have a hearing or a conversation in the middle of a hearing, the same thing goes on. He's able to come out of that room, have that conversation. The judge can either hold his hearing or move to the next hearing while that attorney has that telephone conference, again, alone and by themselves and confidential.
And following up on that, does the defense counsel, does he or she have access to the video so they're able to watch and see the hearing and see the proceedings as they're undergoing?
Absolutely. The video monitoring system is in the middle of the courtroom, and it's set up in most areas very much like it is here with the monitors off to the side so that everyone can have a visual of it. On the monitor, it has the courtroom. The courtroom sees the inmate predominantly, and vice versa at the facility. It pans to whoever is speaking at that particular time, if they so choose to. So the inmate can see who's talking, who's asking the questions without having to strain or be concerned. And the quality of the video is excellent.
Good. What about the cost? You have a cost savings in your transport. Are you retaining some of that cost savings in order to make sure that every facility has the video network going forward, or is that going to be something we have to see in the budget later to add to every facility?
We've already implemented at each facility.
Yes.
Good.
As well as technical assistance with that. So.
Okay, perfect. That's good to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Representative Holcomb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few. One is recognizing the technology that you're using to try to minimize the payment of overtime overall.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a sense of how much overtime is built into this budget?
There's no overtime built in this budget.
No, but we're projected to pay about 28 million right now.
Yeah, while we implement, we're projecting what, 28 million? Yes.
28 million.
Yes.
That could hire a lot of people, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's one question. Second question is, for this proposal, is the takeaway that fewer inmates will have access to training or GED opportunities?
No. With my goal is every year, our goal is 3,000 GEDs per year. And only thing we're doing, because my cuts did not affect programming or teachers inside the facility. Okay, we're just making sure we got a track record now giving GEDs and vocational certificates inside the prison. So it was more comfortable for me to make this move to change the criteria to go to the county, because I'm very confident we could be able to give the GEDs and vocational certificate within the confines of the prison versus the counties.
Okay. Okay. And then
to back up to answer that question, my purpose, and I think I told this to the family, is my goal is to make sure every offender in my charge gets a GED, a vocational skill, a trade. If we can accomplish it, I don't know, but that's my goal, to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think many of us agree with that, because when they transition out, challenge is to have a life skill that then they can make a living, right?
Yes.
And on that, I'm glad that Chairman Welch asked you about the bonding, because in your answer to that, you said that there's 13,000 that have chronic conditions, and some of them are even in wheelchairs, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And it made me think, what is the calculus on keeping them incarcerated, and how much of a continued threat to the public they are? In other words, is the incidence of having a chronic condition something that is being considered in how long we have to keep these in jail? Because if somebody has very limited health capacity, what's the likelihood they're going to be a threat to the public? And I understand they could give orders and things like that and not actually execute crimes, but are these things that we're thinking about, because this is a massive population?
Yeah, one of the things, we have a great working relationship with Partners in Parole. We have population meeting once a month with Partners in Parole, but also we have what's called a medical reprieve process. But it's a very stringent process that we evaluate every individual has a medical need that are, and we submit to the parole board for them to review those individuals. So we're constantly vetting that aging population to see if those individuals meet that requirement for a medical reprieve. And we forward to those parole board. If they meet the standards and we can find housing for them upon the release, we do that.
Okay. And then when they're released, I recognize that that's outside of your issue. Mm-hmm. Then they have challenges having coverage with insurance, health insurance coverage?
Well, again, I might be wading off into a subject I'm not too versed on, but I think a lot of the vast majority of those individuals are eligible for Medicaid.
That's what I would think
and so,
too.
And once they come off our roll, if we can meet those certain requirements, they go over into the Medicaid road.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a follow-up to my friend at the end, Mr. Holcomb, I think that everybody needs to know that the current administration has done so well in dealing with our senior inmates, our chronically ill inmates. We worked for years to get a proposition started down at Bostic. Took one of the old buildings down there at the Milledgeville campus, and with private investments, it was converted into a nursing home facility. And through the cooperation of DOC and pardon and paroles, they were able to pardon, and with a residency requirement that they stayed there. It's basically a secure nursing home. These are for the infirmed inmates, the ones that the only crimes that they could commit at this point due to physical disabilities is those that are in their mind. And that's been such a great program down there because in most of those cases, they are then paid for, that nursing home space is paid for by Medicare, i.e. Medicaid, which if they were in a prison hospital, that they couldn't be there. So at that point, as they're approaching that the limits, my understanding is that they're going to, that nursing home is fixing to double in capacity so we get ahead of the curve. So that's that comment on that. I just want to make a few general comments. I've been following this budget with this department for a lot of years. I've been following so long, I remember when Alan looked like a college kid coming out, and he sure don't look like that today. You know, I watched this department in its up and downs, and I probably feel better about the direction of this department today than I ever have felt. We're talking about a mega agency, and we're not talking about a sexy agency because for whatever reason, politicians, governors, whoever it may be, because of the subject matter, there's no votes to be got from dealing with inmates. Quite frankly, I mean, that's just, I'm not saying that to be ugly, it's just my opinion. And I've seen that it's easy to cut funds in an agency like this because nobody in the free world cares about an inmate. But at the same time, I've always said that inmates, that 99.9% of all inmates, they're going to see freedom at some point. And they've got to be prepared for that day. Now, I've got a couple of questions, and I'm not just to give y'all all the accolades. You know, this commissioner, one of the things that I've always been endeared to him, he's one of the few commissioners that actually worked his way up through the ranks. He knows corrections. And, you know, that's such a breath of fresh air. But I got a couple of questions, and I notice all the cuts, and these are pretty major issues, and I'm certainly hoping you've got some leeway. 2 questions, the mental health cuts. Knowing that mental health, that the Department of Corrections is the #1 mental health facility. This started back in the 90s when we got rid of everything for the free world on mental health. Department of Corrections has actually become the mental health facility in the state. Do you think that we're going to be able to get by with the programs and dealing with all the mental health conditions? Not trying to put you on the spot. I know water runs downhill. Yeah. Governor called for the cuts. But I want to be sure that I've got concerns.
I'm glad you talked about my history a little bit. So we tried to take a systematic approach when we did our reductions, and we tried to stay away from anything that touched the core mission. And that core mission is protecting and serving the public by running safe and secure facilities. And we tried not to touch any core function positions. One of the things we talked about that we have a new mental health provider, which is Centurion. And I'm constantly on the phone with them, making sure that they're adhering to that contract whatever that contract says, we're making sure that they follow it to the T. One of the things that we're really pushing with them is using telepsych a lot, leveraging technology to making sure that we have that in front of those individuals. As the population expands, like I say, in the next 5 years, we're expecting the population to increase by 1,500, okay? If that population expands and a lot of those individuals are mental health, of course, we're gonna have to adjust accordingly. We're gonna have to adjust for the influx of, if we do have a more mental health offenders. I mean, that's gonna be natural. But right now, what we're doing, we're trying to maximize everything that we have and making sure that we're collectively, as an executive team, doing all the things we can do internally to make sure that we weather this storm as they come in. But we will make our ask accordingly to the population increase. We will make our ask according to that, if that answers your question.
It does.
Okay.
Second, with the follow-up to that, for years, the DOC has contracted with the Medical School of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Are y'all looking? I think y'all were looking at doing an analysis of that contract.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm criticizing the Medical School of Georgia, but it's just by nature and it's something in my older days. But of looking at this budget, Medical School of Georgia, a lot of people think that because they're part of the state of Georgia, that fourth branch of government under the Board of Regents, that it's feeding one agency feeds into the other for the support of the other. But when we get to looking at dollars and cents and actual care and treatment of inmates, how are y'all coming along with the looking at possibilities, or are y'all looking at possibilities of bidding out or taking bids from the private sector of providing coverage, or as far as treatment for?
Yeah. Right now, we're in the process. We have a consultant that is doing exactly what you're saying, looking at the model of delivery that GCH and Augusta University are giving to us, and and they're going to give us, after they come in and look and see if their delivery is suitable to our needs now. If that model that we presently have with AU, is that working or is it not working? And once we get that recommendation back, we're going to make a decision whether we need to stay with AU or put it on the street for bid to somebody who can give us a better healthcare delivery. One of the things we've had strategic planning meetings with AU and with Dr. Keel, and both I sitting at the table trying to find remedies. He's open for us going out with a consultant to see whether or not their delivery model is best for us. And so, but until then, we're sitting down trying to make sure we can reduce costs as much as we can until that report comes back.
Very good. And the last question, if I might. Facility is something that always bears on my soul about the foundation of the Department of Corrections, and that's those men and women that are actually working in facilities that are caring for the security in these facilities. How many in the facilities today? How many COs and personnel are we short?
We're 1,750 CO vacancies.
I have concerns with that, and of course, part of that for the benefit of the committee. A few years ago, a couple of years back, when we gave somewhat of a bump to those, we had correctional officers who were living on poverty wages. That were something that I thought then, and I still continue to think that it's a terrible thing, and it's because they're not as sexy as school teachers, as I talked about sexiness in the political realm. I'm glad to see the $1,000 for below 40, but it's something that is still those employees that work for corrections that are the backbone of corrections. That needs to be adjusted at some point to move up. But I'm also concerned about the vacancies. And quite honestly, a lot of the vacancies isn't at the doing of the department. It's the doing that you can't find. You can't find employees or applicants that can pass background checks. They can pass this and that. because it's just a sign of a good economy that everybody's working that wants a job. But at some point, and I'm saying this more to the benefit of the committee, and I guess I am to y'all, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir with y'all on this, but for the benefit of the committee, you know, when we talk about all these pay raises, you know, we all know that one of the crux of why we're here now so early in the session is because of a downturn in revenue, not the economy, but a downturn in the revenue and the priorities of spending. That we're here to give the extra $2,000 for school teachers. But what are we doing for these folks who are the most valuable resources in state government? And I mean that not just for correctional employees, but for all the other state employees. That we have a misguided system on these pay raises, in my opinion. And I'm hoping that these words are going to reach out to the members. That, yes, school teachers deserve to be paid, but so do everybody else. And when we're doing these type of pay raises, you know, it's like it was brought to my attention that, you know, all the administrators in education, if they carry a teaching certificate, they're getting that $5,000 pay raise too, no matter what their salary level may be. But to me, I still go back to what I say. It costs as much to feed a family and to pay the bills for someone working as a correctional officer or in the facility to maintain these the mission as it does anybody else. And it's something I'd like to reach out to the members to put that in your mind when these things come up, because corrections has a necessity of a mission, and that's the housing and the safety, not just for the public, but for these inmates. And I thank y'all for the job that y'all do.
Thank you.
And for what y'all have to tolerate with in the fulfillment of that mission.
All right, Mr. Powell will be available to do commercials later. And I hear you make some doggone good ones too. I appreciate that sentiment. I'm in jest. And I think many of us share that sentiment, especially the latter part of what you were saying concerning priorities. Let me ask a few questions, then I'm going to turn it over to Representative Williams for some follow-up. When do you plan to have the Metro Phase 3 open, Transition Center? When is that going to be open?
It's supposed to be January 21.
January 21.
January 21.
Yes.
And then on the over the past several years, we started funding a medical records conversion project. I think it's the total amount of that thing. I think is reaching $37 million. What is the status of that medical record conversion?
We took a situational pause, strategic pause, because that is going to be a part of the consultant when we do the healthcare delivery model. And when we come back, if we do bid it out, we're going to bid all that as one package, the medical as well as the EHR.
How long has the pause been?
It's about middle of last year.
Middle of last year.
Summer of last year.
Yes.
That's when we started. Around June, I believe.
I thought we appropriated a lot of this money 3 years ago.
We did.
Okay, so
in amended FY17.
Yeah. So amended 17, we started. How much is spent? How much has been spent of that? The overall accumulated money?
About $8.5 million.
$8.5 million out of the 37?
Yeah, it's
Or is it 37 plus the 8.5 million?
37 includes this fiscal year.
Okay.
In which there's a cut of almost $2 million.
So the 8.5 million then is that in addition to 37 that's been spent?
That's included.
It's included. So we're 29 million is where we're still holding on to.
We actually used some of the continuation funding to cover the physical health care cost last year.
You use what to cover the continuation?
We have about just over $3 million in continuation funding every year to maintain the system, and that funding, that's what's in the cut for FY21 or FY20 amended.
And that's to maintain the system. What system?
That's to maintain the EHR system once it's up and running.
And then, I had a question from a student this morning. Bernard asked me this morning from Henry County School System. They were here this morning, as we often get youth leadership groups that come through. And Bernard asked me if what the numbers of prison on CO violence is in our system, and how does that compare to the national average? My understanding that ours is fairly low, despite, and that's largely because of the work that Chairman Powell was talking about with your COs. Number two, the hardening of prisons that has been undergoing for the last 5-6 years that we've been doing every year with bond allocations on hardening prisons, and you have that in your bond request here. And so that was my understanding. That's despite shifting of criminal justice reform, where you're having more violent criminals coming into the system. So it's a huge accolade to know that our numbers are lower. So that was the first question, was prisoner on CO violence, and then the other was prisoner on prisoner violence. And how does that compare to national averages? Do you know?
Well, our numbers are down, but I got to get the numbers from a national standpoint. How does it compare? Because it's kind of how do they? It depends on how different states calculate or categorize an assault or anything like that. Some people might say a push is an assault, or some people might say a stab is an assault. So it's how they relate those definitions. One of the things, though, even though our numbers are down, I tell people our numbers are down, but when our guys do something, they do it in a big way because we have a more violent inmate population. Yep. When they have a disagreement, they're more apt to go ahead and I'm gonna make sure I try to finish it instead of trying to let them come back another day. So that's what we're dealing with now with a more violent population. The numbers are down, but when you have an incident, it's a serious incident when you have it.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I appreciate knowing that. If I could get the numbers in comparison offline, I'd like to try to send that back to that student that asked me this morning. I thought that was, I had some very interesting, very thoughtful, in-depth questions from young people going through high school. These are sophomores in high school. I thought the attention to that was interesting to hear, and I'd like to try to respond back to him. But I appreciate your answer. Representative Williams, you have a few last say.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to say first, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. When Representative Powell started his statements, very beginning, I pushed back from the table and looked at him because he sounded so liberal. I thought he was going to make a major announcement. He was changing over. He was moving. You brought me to the verge of tears. But I'm telling you, that's him now. He's back to himself. But I just want to mention from your question of your 28 million in overtime. In another life, I've been in over 200 businesses in about 6 state governments. The first part, how many employees do you have? As I asked that, because when you put it in context, it's not a whole lot of money, because my experience has been on the ground, not from human resources people, but on the ground, that a great deal of employees will tell you, I'm able to continue to work here because I can do some overtime. Without the overtime, you start to lose good people. Because now there is a point where you start having diminishing returns because too much overtime productivity starts to plunge. But without that overtime, you lose a whole lot of good people.
I'm gonna say this: we have what we call our top 200 earners in overtime. Okay, we had some individuals that were working 28 straight days every month. That's physically impossible to do. So we knew there was some activities going on there, but because there was a lag in the timekeeping process, we couldn't really have real time to identify those individuals. But we have roughly 6,500 field positions in the CO ranks around. So that's, we're, again, we're going to continue to use overtime, but we got to manage it better. And how we're doing it now, we weren't managing overtime; it was managing us. And so, but with this timekeeping software, we're able to in real time do that. Also, take care of those hardworking people who really legitimately working overtime versus those ones that were pencil whipping us and we couldn't catch it. Okay.
Let me, I know I said the last word, but I did want to follow up a couple of questions. The Commissioner, I think we've asked this before. What is the safe ratio, the ratio that you're comfortable with in terms of COs to inmates, especially given our population, the more violent members of the population that you're dealing with now? What's the ratio that you feel is safe?
Our dormitories depends on the physical design of our facilities. Some facility, the dormitory houses up to 50 offenders. The largest dormitory houses up to 96 offenders. Our ratio preferably is 1 to 50 or either 1 to 96 because we want to make sure there's a body on that floor in that housing unit, at every housing unit, and one in the control room.
Mm-hmm.
That's not ideal staffing for the Georgia Department of Correction.
So really, it's 2 to 50 then, and 2, because one in the control room and one walking the floor. So,
yes.
Okay, so 2 to 50, 2 to 60, 96.
2 to 96.
Okay. What about now? With your current staffing, that these are filled positions, not the frozen and not the vacant yet to be filled. Are we at that ratio currently with current filled positions?
With a combination of field positions and overtime, yes, we're managing the staffing requested that we need to do.
How much? So if you were to eliminate effectively the overtime or reduce the overtime, as you're intending to do under the budget, how many more filled positions would you need to have in order to balance that out and maintain the ratio?
Well, my goal is to get the 1,700 vacant positions filled.
Okay.
One of the things is you have what you call a priority. You have different posts. You have priority posts, priority 1, 2, and 3 posts. Priority 1 posts are those posts that you have to fill. And so at a facility, if we know when a shift supervisor comes in, he looks at the number of priority posts he has, okay? He looks at the number of individuals that shows up to work, okay? If you have between 23 and 31 priority posts and you have, say, 22 people show up, then you have a need for at least 8 more. Then you look at who's assigned to your priority 2 and priority 3 posts, and you make sure that you get those individuals for those posts to fill those vacancies. So there's a lot of strategies to make sure we get those posts covered. But right now, giving you a definitive answer what I need to make sure that happen, I'm going to say my goal is to make sure every vacant position I have is filled, to make sure we carry out
the vacant funded positions.
Vacant funded positions.
And the 1,750, that's vacant funded positions, is that right?
Yes. CO.
Yes.
Yes.
And so this is going back to what Representative Holcomb was saying, and I think Representative Williams and Representative Powell's also alluding to, is that maintaining a safe ratio has to be of critical importance, and maintaining people that are alert and able-minded and bodied to do the position and take on whatever challenge might arise. Is also extremely important to both the CO safety and the prisoner safety. The concern is that if you're not paying enough to your base salary for your COs and your priority 1 COs, then you aren't going to recruit them and you're not going to retain them. We dealt with this several years ago, but it's time changes and salary and the economy gets better and the job market becomes better for people to leave. So there is a concern here in the committee that you're not able to retain those priority ones. What is your retention? Your turnover? What's your turnover rate for those priority ones?
Right now we were right at 40%.
40%.
The thing, you're absolutely right. We have our problem is not recruitment. Our problem is retention. Last year we hired over 2,000, but we lost over 2,000.
You trained they went through training, right?
Yes.
And how much does it cost to send a CO through training?
I had to give you that
7,000? Approximately 6,000.
But like I said earlier,
So you don't lose just the person. You lost the salary for paying that person to be employed, and then you lost $6,000 in training on that person. So you've lost the entire amount for those number of months that you had them.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not providing you with the level of service that someone has been there for 6, 8 months, a year, or longer.
Yeah, but one of the good signs is, like I said, we had a positive net gain of COs in the month of December. We're just waiting to get our numbers for the month of January. Also, one of the things we talked about retention piece, and some of the exit surveys they always say money, but then also the second thing they say is supervision. So what we've done is we focus on that supervision piece for as relates to retaining our individuals, meaning the sergeants and the lieutenants. We're making sure that they got professional training as far as management to deal with those individuals, and doing that professional development of those supervisors, because those are the ones that are affecting that retention rate. Because when you look at the exit surveys, again, they say money, then also they say how I'm being treated. So as a leader, I know I got to affect change with those individuals who are supervising those individuals, and that's what we're doing now. We're developing Sergeant's Academy, Lieutenant Academy to try to work on that. And I think the fruits of our efforts are paying off, because, again, we won't know until I get my numbers for January. But the number for December was in a positive for a net gain of about 46, I think, to the good as far as hiring. So hopefully we're turning the corner on it. I know one thing, hope is not a method, but we've got some strategies that we're attacking the problem with to make sure, and retention is our biggest Achilles heel is retention.
So let me ask this also: the overtime number, was it 28 or 26 million?
It was 26 million we paid in fiscal year 19.
Okay, and then the other question is how much lapse funds did you have for the fiscal year? How much?
It was under
18.
300,000.
Under 300.
But if you look at the budget, it was, I forgot how many million because of the state health benefit reduction that we turned back in.
Okay.
But if you take out the health benefit, it was about 289,000.
289,000. Okay.
That was for all programs too.
So then, what was the money used for all the funded and vacant positions? And that's a tremendous amount of salaries that for 1,700 people. Where was that money spent?
That covers our FLSA overtime, and then
That's been paying your overtime.
Yes.
So you've been using the positions to pay
Yes.
the overtime.
Yes.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for the
Okay.
presentation. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the men and women that serve with the DOC and the state of Georgia. We appreciate their service.
Thank you for
For that,
your
we'll conclude the meeting, and I appreciate all the committee members sticking around and asking questions. And we'll convene at a later date. Probably looks like Tuesday morning. Probably looks like.